Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Say Report. I'm your host, Devon Decker, and joining me, my host companion, Sejohn Sarowick. Oh, Sejohn.
Hey everybody, what's going on? We're late for the holiday, so I mean, like, there's really nothing that we could do. Like, today is the day of no jokes, Devin.
Well, you know what? I'm okay with that. I hate April Fool's Day. If I haven't said that before on the show, then I would be very surprised. I
Oh
hate
no.
it. I absolutely hate April Fool's Day.
I feel
Um,
like I will say before we get too deep into this, though, do you agree or disagree with the fact that like this one kind of just came and went, huh? Like nothing, like
I
there was like no major like weird internet meme. There was no like video released or like commercial that was put out that everybody's talking about. Like this one kind of just happened, huh? Which is
the
fine. I'm happy that something did not lie to me and trick me into thinking like Mario 64 was getting an up-res version on the Switch or some shit like that. Like, you know what I mean? Like
yeah,
I'm happy that didn't happen.
I agree. I agree with that. I think it's part of it's fatigue. Like part of it's the fact that like every day on social media has become April 1st. So you do it.
Mm,
In fact, what it really felt like is a lot of people subverting the expectation and sharing their real news stories on the 1st of April.
and just
Uh,
being like, we promise this isn't April Fool's,
yeah.
which is like the like that is the one thing that let me like really. I didn't find any big memes yesterday. I think the closest might have been like the Sonic gets murdered like bit that like honestly kind of popped up in my feed at the end of the day.
I
I was like, oh,
wait,
where were you all day? Is what I basically exactly what I said when I saw it.
so the only time that I thought that it was like a joke was when your brother mentioned it, when Zach was like, "This is how you do April Fools, right?" Because it was available to download on March 31st. And a bunch of like pixel artists that I follow on Twitter and stuff were sharing it and talking about how exciting it was to have been part of the experience. So it didn't really feel like an April Fool's joke until Zach was like, "Now this is how you do it," and I'm like, "But I just thought this was a game. I just thought this was Sega embracing the fact that they're Sega and releasing
I
a,
think
a
kind of
mystery game."
yeah, I think this kind of feeds into what you were saying about how the internet is just kind of a joke nowadays anyway. Is like the idea of them doing a Phoenix Wright style murder mystery game where Sonic is the victim in the Sonic games. At this point, why the fuck not?
What?
With all of the games that have come out of the Sonic franchise, well, yeah, of course now they're gonna try this.
Like they did it better last year, and it might have been 2 years ago, I don't even know, where they're like, we're finally releasing these betas of games that you've always wanted. So they
Yeah,
did like Fantasy Zone, but it was like all modern graphics and blacks and browns and grays. And
right.
it was just Fantasy Zone. It was just the game Fantasy Zone, one level, but in the like grim dark of Gears of War. There was the 3D Golden Axe, which is called Golden Axed, because they're like, yeah, we got through a whole first level, and then they axed the project, and that was like a really cool little deal. I don't remember what the other one was. It was one that I like wouldn't have really cared about. Like those are two that did. And then the final one was a Streets of Rage remake that of 2, specifically of Streets of Rage 2, instead of playing as the Streets of Rage characters, it was all characters from Yakuza. So that was awesome too. Like that was the way to do it. Like them acting like this is this thing that we did, and these are games that are never going to happen. And it's like, well, there were games that were never going to happen anyway, because they just made fake little tech demos for these games, and that was a cool way to do it. But this game, this Sonic the Hedgehog murder mystery, I'm like, I mean, Murder Mystery 2 just came out on Netflix. What a smart way for freaking Sega to jump on the murder mystery wagon.
You
With
know,
a
and the joke all along was just that Sega has no sense.
yeah,
No, yeah, I mean but like to your point, like this whole thing where it didn't really feel like that wasn't popping up everywhere and people weren't talking about it as like a great April Fool's joke, right? Like by the time I saw it, people were just like, Sega tried this today. And I was like, cool, good on them, like trying a thing, but like I didn't see it until the end of the day. So it's just wild to me that like
yeah.
there wasn't like some announcement about like Fast and the Furious gets extended for 10 more movies or some ridiculous thing like that. Sorry. So you were talking about why you don't like April Fool's Day, and I was talking about how this one was like of all of them seemed like the biggest of busts.
Yeah.
Was essentially my point.
Well, I mean, granted, I think if you followed along specifically with this year, right? Like everything I've talked about this year, if you followed the entire Say Report, like universe, oeuvre, multiverse, however you want to talk about it. Like, I hate gaslighting. I hate when someone is outright telling you a lie.
Yeah,
And
well, and specifically in terms of gaslighting, acting like they've always been telling you this, like
yeah,
like it has always been this way, and it's like, what a minute, what?
what are you talking about? So it's one of those situations where like that's all April Fools has become. Like the
Right.
idea that it used to be like little pranks, like I got with you have a hole in your shirt, and like I do, and like it's one of my favorite shirts. So I would be upset if I had a hole in it. I wouldn't like burn the house down if I had a hole in it because let me tell you a little secret about this shirt that I'm wearing. It's my River City Girls shirt. I have like 4 other ones. So that when this one is time to retire, I can just open up another one. Because when you find a shirt you like, you should get multiples.
This is what growing old is, folks. At some point, you just devolve into Doug Funny. You just have just a closet full of the same outfits.
Well,
6 times over.
I have had an outfit system since college. Let's just be honest about it. I always wear the same outfit on Mondays and Tuesdays, and then I realized, oh, let's make those theme days, and now I'm color coded. I am gray shirts on Mondays, blue shirts on Tuesdays, green shirts Wednesdays, black shirt Thursday, red shirt Friday. Like, for real. That's just how I've been living my life since, I'm going to say 2014.
I think like one of my favorite like tropes in TV is like it has to be the common outfit, and then like they inevitably do the episode where they talk about where like a person's outfit came from.
Yeah.
Like why this person always wears this hat. Like I think they did that with Louise. I think that's literally the movie, actually, isn't it? If I'm not mistaken, it's of Bob's Burgers.
I haven't seen Bob's Burgers, the movie, so no
But
spoilers.
I'm pretty sure that a large part of the story,
Is
or
how
at least
she got the
a bit in it, is how she got her hat. Yeah,
Okay,
I might be misremembering that or conflating it with. An
there's
episode,
definitely
but,
the episode Earsy Rider where she loses it to Logan, and that was a really good episode that like kind of
Yeah.
talked about it. So,
But like, don't like. I'm trying to think of like, did Recess ever do an episode where like TJ gets his bomber jacket or something? Like what are like? There's always that inevitable kind of acknowledgement that like, man, you've got the same outfit 6 times over, right?
yeah. I think my favorite one is the 7th episode of Futurama, which honestly is too early to make a joke like this, but they're like, fuck it, we're Futurama. When Leela is wearing the lime green tank top. And like,
Yes.
there's no acknowledgement of it until the professor's like, it's as painfully obvious as you trying to get attention with your new lime green tank top.
Yeah.
Like it's a beautiful
especially because
setup.
it's like
Yeah.
especially because it's like 4 or 5 lines into the bit. Like it's not like the first thing that
Yeah.
they say. So it's just like, yeah, we
Half
were
an
all thinking
episode
about
is
that.
passed on. Like half an episode is gone. You're just like, oh, well, we're not going to talk about it, right? I mean, that episode, that's My Three Sons, which is it's definitely in my top 10 episodes of Futurama, possibly top 5. Before Futurama was available on DVD, it was one of the only episodes I had on like VHS that I had recorded. And I was just a big fan of that episode because the jokes are so thick in My Three Sons.
Yeah,
And
we're not going to shift gears into a Futurama conversation because that'll just be the rest of the episode. But I think I've famously talked about in the past about how Futurama was one of those shows that when it first came out didn't quite land for my family. We were huge Simpsons people, so we were like, oh, new Futurama, and then like watched a couple of episodes and we're like, this isn't doing it. And it wasn't until like years later that it really kind of clicked with me. But one of the very first episodes I remember like watching on a CRTV, like a little like 15-inch on my desk in my bedroom as I was doing like homework one night, is that episode.
Yeah. It's one that just, I mean, it starts with the bot wash. I know we're not going to talk about Futurama this whole episode, I promise that. But, like, that
didn't
bot wash cold open, like,
Yeah.
that was the
Oh,
episode where they're like, we are going to try to catch an audience with this episode. It reminds me of Freaks and Geeks famously has 3 pilots, according to Judd Apatow and Paul Feig, because like there's the first pilot, but then nobody watched that, so then nobody was watching the show. So when NBC's like, we're going to give a little bit more marketing to this show, the 7th episode was written. It did not exist beforehand, and they treated it as a second pilot for the show to make sure that everybody could like understand who these characters are and what they stand for. That's really what My Three Sons feels like. It feels like this is our second pilot for Futurama, because I don't think they ever had a problem finding an audience, but I I wouldn't be surprised at the same
Oh well, in the
time.
early days, remember they got kind of dicked around a lot, like a lot of the other.
They got
Um,
preempted a bunch because they were a
yeah,
7:30 show. So
so they got fucked around a lot for not being The Simpsons. But Matt Groening was one of the few people in that system that had the weight to throw around to make sure that they didn't get fucked around so much that they got screwed. Although famously, that we're talking about a show that got canceled 3 times. But like,
yeah, exactly.
but to that, but yeah, they. Yeah, again, we're not gonna keep.
Yeah, we're not gonna.
We basically, I think I think this means it's finally time for us to do the Futurama special, Dev.
I think yeah, it's I don't know, soon, someday soon. I think when it comes back, like right before it comes back, yeah, we should probably do an episode that's all about Futurama all the time. But yeah, that episode was probably one where there was no football, there was nothing that could have preempted it, so we know that this is going to be airing. So we know that we'll have an audience. It just feels like it was probably that situation, not something as drastic as NBC saying, look, we're actually going to market your show now, Judd. Write another episode so that people can be introduced to these characters.
Yeah, well, because we're talking about a time that's before DVRs, before, like maybe people are recording things on tape if they're in a privileged enough position to have a VCR and do that and care enough to do that, right? Yeah, because my mom and dad's tapes were precious. They were saved only for Friends, Seinfeld, and X-Files. And at that point, you'd filled up a whole tape. So like, we weren't going to record anything else.
Remember when I bought my first VHS tape that was for me. I went to the Walmart back when it was where the job lot is now in Coventry. Love these local references. And I'm like, I saw one, it was $3, and I'm like, this is mine. And I taped whatever I fucking wanted on that one. Like, because I'm not beholden to the fears that, like, the tape will break. And yeah, I'm going to do it on the one that gives me 6 hours of taping. Because it's like, it doesn't matter if this breaks to me.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Good times. But, yeah, so that, I don't even know what we were talking about. That got
April
us to Futurama.
Fools, man. Because April Fools was such a bust, we just didn't have much to talk about.
Well, I mean, I'm glad that April Fools was a bust. I still felt like I couldn't go on Twitter or Facebook because anything that I read could be false. But
I couldn't either, mostly because I've nuked both of those accounts.
Yeah, right. So, the big one for me that I saw, and this morning was the one where they're like, no, this wasn't a joke, we weren't kidding, is Night Trap is being released on Game Boy Advance. And the tweet was Howard Lincoln saying that Night Trap will never be on a Nintendo system, and then being like, well, it is now because it's the future.
So when they say Game Boy Advance, you don't mean like the emulator on the Switch?
No, I mean the cart. Like there are carts that are being made. It's a limited run games thing.
What a dumb.
I don't know, man. I don't know. Like it's on Switch too. Like I'm fairly certain there's a Switch limited run games copy as well. So Howard Lincoln has already been proven wrong in terms of Night Trap will never be on a Nintendo system. But also, like, he said it in 1993, and I don't think anyone would have foreseen the boutique publisher that Limited Run Games actually is.
Well, and it's beyond that. When he was saying that in 1993, I don't want to be like putting words in his mouth, but like,
oh, you don't want to be Ben Miles? That's going to be hilarious later.
But it feels more like he's referencing the fact that Nintendo very much established itself very, very early on in the 90s in an effort to kind of maintain a good semblance in the market with parents. Like, they were the safe console, right? It's why Sega chose to go so like badass and like why Sonic's the bad boy to Mario's good boy, right? Like, is that Nintendo basically was trying to push itself as the squeaky clean guys, right? To the like, and they did a lot of the same stuff that Disney did in order to maintain that. In that, it's not that they weren't going to publish these kinds of games that were maybe a little bit more risque or violent or heavy on the whatever. It's that they would hoist them off to a side like company that was still owned by them but labeled something different, right? They would be published by Tengen or some shit like that, right? And so Nintendo kind of was able to maintain this image, and Night Trap would not fit that image. And so like the idea of Night Trap coming out on a Nintendo console in the early 90s, totally, yeah, like fuck that. Like, Nintendo doesn't want that happening at all. But like they don't have to maintain that image anymore in order to they could still be the good guys of gaming and still give people access to this kind of shit, right?
Yeah. They understand that it's not just for kids anymore. Which actually, I mean, I made the Ben Miles joke, but I'll talk about it. One of the things that happened this weekend is Tetris came out. I don't know if you saw
Yeah,
the Apple
on
movie.
Apple, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm excited to watch it, but yeah,
It is excellent. If you currently have Apple Television, because it's the last season of Ted Lasso, so I imagine most people do right now. We're 3 episodes in. Are
yeah,
you
I think
watching?
a lot of people are waiting.
Yeah.
Well, I think like me, I think a lot of people are waiting until it's over so that they can pay for that
And
service
then they have it for
just
1 month. Yeah.
and then they can just watch it all and watch other stuff. Yeah.
So when you inevitably get Apple TV Plus for the finale of Ted Lasso, make sure you also watch Tetris. It's excellent. It is an excellent movie. It is not just like some kiddie. It's not The Wizard. It's not Super Mario Brothers.
I don't think that's what I was worried about. I think my bigger concern is it looks almost like it's just like Kingsman Nintendo.
Well, I mean, it is by Marv, and Matthew Vaughn is
Exactly.
definitely
with
Taron Egerton. Yeah. My
Yeah,
mom's
like,
convinced it's Leonardo DiCaprio. We watched the movie. She saw that it's Taron Egerton in the end credits, and she still says that Leonardo DiCaprio was great in the film.
I think if Taron Egerton heard her compare him to Leo like 20 years ago, he'd take that as a pretty big compliment. So it's okay.
Oh yeah, and it's because of just how lost in the character he is. It's really, really good. But the reason why I make the Ben Miles thing is that Ben Miles, Patrick from Coupling, probably his most famous role. Would you deny that?
I would argue that a lot of people nowadays probably know him for V for Vendetta, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, that's a really good point. But he hasn't done anything since V for Vendetta, right?
But no, he was also a ninja. He works with the Wachowskis a lot. He was also a ninja assassin too.
Oh, right.
Like yeah, he shows up in Speed Racer. I think he's got those weird kind of like I'm connected to these specific types of director roles and shows up and shit. The thing about Coupling is you got to remember, you and I remember Coupling, and a lot of people our age remember Coupling, but Coupling is kind of fallen out of the like. Basically, when people turned on Moffat during Who, there was a huge resurgence of people being like, Coupling was kind of bullshit too, huh? And they aren't wrong.
Oh, they're not
like,
wrong. Coupling is garbage.
It on a regular basis. Yeah. So I want to give that guy credit where credit's due. He is in other projects that are still worth going back to.
Yeah. I don't know. I think that he's one of the best parts in Coupling. As everybody celebrates
I don't
Jeff,
disagree.
he's super good.
I don't disagree. But
Patrick.
if everybody out there is like, I'm not watching Coupling, then there's other places you can go
True.
and see.
Yeah. I don't know,
It's not like that's the only role he had.
He ends up playing Howard Lincoln in Tetris. And that made me super happy.
That's amazing.
Like, it was great. And I'm like, oh, Ben Miles. And my mother's like, who's that? And I'm like, Coupling? Like, we had the exact conversation that we just had on the show, basically. But that got her, too, why she knew who the person was and who the actor was. She probably wouldn't know V for Vendetta. I mean, like, V for Vendetta, I clearly think of it. I couldn't tell you his character's name in V for Vendetta.
I couldn't tell you the character name either. He plays one of the anchors that like has some stuff to
that has a lot of things to say.
But in Ninja Assassin, he ends up playing one of the cops, which I just like. I love. If I'm remembering correctly. I mean, I gotta go back and watch that movie.
Either or, he was fantastic as Howard Lincoln, and then to read the quote from Howard Lincoln on the limited run games like press release that Night Trap will never be on a Nintendo system, it like really hit kind of cool. And but yeah, Tetris is excellent. I don't want to ruin it for anybody, but I will say this: I've been playing a lot of Tetris too as a result of it.
Well, yeah, it's because especially for me, I've been playing a ton of it because the best version of Tetris, the Game Boy version, is on the Switch now.
I don't know how you could say that's the best version of Tetris.
Tell me a version that you think is better than that.
NES Tetris is far better than that. I mean, to the fact that the international Tetris like World Championships run on NES.
That's
Tetris.
not Tetris though. That's like yes.
What?
Huh? The spelling of Tetris on the original box art for NES uses a for some reason Russian ya.
I did not know
instead of an R.
I did not know that. I thought it was an R.
If you look at the Tetris only on the NES logo, if you look at that, I'm pretty sure it's only on the NES. The R is reversed because it's trying to be
right
more
because they're
Russian.
trying to be all
right. In Russia, that letter is actually said ya, so it's like yas.
Tetris.
That's the problem with them trying to make it look more Russian is that they actually used an actual Russian letter.
Wow, I had no idea. It's spelled Tetris everywhere else, but on that logo. I don't know,
Exactly,
but
probably because somebody realized, hey, you realize that you're not calling this game by what you
Alexei
spelled it as.
Alexei Pithavnov. Pethavnov, I don't know how to say his name. And it was probably Hank Rogers who was like, "Yeah, we'll turn the R around."
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know. I think that's the definitive version of Tetris. As good as the Game Boy one is, the NES version has like just a little bit more smoothness to it. And I mean,
Yeah,
I
but
say that as somebody who's
but that doesn't, it doesn't matter how better it is as far as how it's made. I think that the Game Boy one becomes the definitive one because literally the Game Boy one is the one that got brought places and shown to people. Like the Game Boy version is the one that got into my parents' hand that then made them want to buy a Super Nintendo at that time because by the time they got a hold of it, like the definitive version doesn't necessarily mean it is the best made version. What I mean is that's the version that everybody eventually got their hands on.
Yeah, because it was packed in with the Game Boy, and now I could risk cannibalizing the movie. But that packing in with the Game Boy, it like guaranteed that they were going to sell 100 million copies of the Game Boy.
Exactly.
And it's good. I mean, Tetris is such a great game. And then the movie, and then the reveal from my mother that she's never played Tetris. And then that question of, should mom never play Tetris? Like, should that just never be a part of her life?
Yeah, I don't. Your mom strikes me as the kind of player, like the limited amount of time that we have talked about her gaming experience, but I know that she's got some. I feel like Tetris would be her bag. Like,
I think that she's
super.
Like, I'm almost afraid that it might awaken something inside of her.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't imagine that she's never
Your
played.
mom just straight up turns into the asshole from the Wizard, just like she buys herself a Power Glove and a Nintendo Championship
It's so
jacket.
bad.
She starts beating you up every time you walk into the house.
That's 4 lines. Speaking of which, that definitive version of Tetris that is on the Switch Online, have you done like online Tetris with it? Like, because you could do that. Dale and I were doing it this morning, and that is the coolest part about that.
That's rad.
Like, straight up, that you can play the 2-player version of Game Boy Tetris through Nintendo Switch Online.
Rad.
But yeah, so that I do want to talk about it, but that's why I had to drop Ben Miles as just somebody who's been on my mind because he played the freaking guy at Nintendo in the Tetris movie.
Rad. I'm excited. To see it when I eventually am able to get a hold of it. But like I said, the family is big Ted Lasso fans, so we're just waiting for the season to end so we can just kind of get in there.
Dang it! I was kind of hoping you were. I hope you were doing it live.
I want to check out Severance. I want to check out what you were hoping. What?
I was hoping you were doing Ted Lasso live because I have some complicated feelings about a storyline that was introduced in the latest episode. And I'll wait and we'll see. The only issue is that like you're not gonna have that week to sit with it. That has been giving me the feelings that I'm feeling. Because you're just gonna go to the next episode probably. And that's an interesting thing. First of all, I always complain about these shows that don't just drop every episode. I used to complain about it, definitely. I think as I've watched more shows that's the release schedule, I've actually come to like it a little bit more. I love it with Ted Lasso because I think that it's good to be able to sit in the emotion of the show, especially as it has become more emotional throughout the second season. Have you watched any of it? Like, I don't want to say anything.
I haven't seen any of it.
Yeah. So, I mean, the show definitely, like, my father hates it now because it's no longer a comedy in his eyes, which is an interesting read on that. I don't think that that's true at all. I think that it's just what he expects from comedy is different from what comedy is in 2023.
Yeah.
It's the same reason, like, he always compares shows to The Office, and then I realize that, like, he doesn't mean the perspective of it or anything like that. He means no laugh track when he compares sitcoms to The Office.
Oh, man.
And it's just like, oh, okay, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. We have to go back to Ben Miles for 2 seconds because this just kind of shows our ignorance, but like completely forgot that he was also just in Andor, like a recurring character for almost half.
I haven't watched any of Andor.
No, I know. I have Ben Miles thing up in front of me, and I just looked at it and realized that was what he was.
He
Like, he's been
plays
doing so much.
Andor in Andor. We're idiots.
Yeah,
No.
he's also fucking Pete Townsend in The Crown. It's a yeah. There's
Yeah.
there's a whole bunch of stuff that we just.
Let's see if you can name more shows that I have just never watched.
I know,
that Ben
I know.
Miles
It's
was
just
in.
that's exactly what I'm saying. Is like there's a huge gap in our Ben Miles watching. I feel, but
For me, it's
but anyway.
Coupling. He is Patrick in Coupling, and the fourth season he really gets to shine because he's the only interesting character left. That's not
Well,
true. Sally
yeah,
is still there too, but I mean,
no, there. Yeah, the way that that show shifts specifically after Jeff leaves for me is the worst.
yeah.
But
But I do think that fourth season without Jeff, we're talking about Coupling just like out of the blue. That's what a show about everything is allowed to do. I love it. I love what we do.
you don't have to say it defensively, man.
I'm not
right there with
defending.
you.
No, it is just like I realize that like I have conversations about the show with people and they're like, why isn't it more focused sometimes? And I'm just like, but that's the beauty of it, right? Like if we were like, hi, this is our podcast, we're a video game podcast, we couldn't do the shit that we do the way that we do it. I just love it. Sorry.
No, do you want to know the real reason why? If anybody out there is seriously asking you this question, it's because the second that we say that we're a video game podcast and then do something like talk about a movie, do you know how much shit those kinds of big shows catch?
Exactly.
And like, yeah, we also catch shit for being unfocused, but at the end of the day, nobody can really hold it against us when we say we'll talk about anything.
Yeah, we're the
right?
show about everything.
Whereas if we make some type of promise that like this is a movie podcast, and then suddenly here we are talking about burritos for 3 hours, people get real shitty about that sort of stuff.
I don't know why. We watched Chef. I know it was Cubano sandwiches, but it kind of worked.
It's like that's not burritos, but keep going.
It kind of worked. What were we talking about? Ben Miles and then something else wherever we were.
You were talking about coupling for 2 seconds.
I was talking about Coupling, and then we were talking about something before Coupling.
April Fools. We're still
Fool.
there.
No, we had like hit something. Ted Lasso. Oh, the shows that are released like once a week so that you can kind of sit with it as opposed to dumping them all. Like I have immense memories of something like Ted Lasso or even something like How I Met Your Father because I've had more time with them, where like that 90s show all runs together because it dropped and I watched it right then and there. I think like the only one that isn't like that is Letterkenny, because sure, I watch Letterkenny all in one go, but like I watch all 10 seasons of Letterkenny all in one go. I don't do it like.
I mean, it's the old binge conversation, right? Where like people were suddenly turning everything into a binge watch, and some shows just like have a different feel when you watch them that way. Some get better for it, some not so much. And I think figuring out that formula has been part of the problem for streaming services since like Netflix really started the whole kind of concept of drop everything all at once, right? Yeah. Like they've been trying to figure out like what are the best ways. Even Netflix themselves has really fallen more into doing the A/B system, where they drop half the season first and then wait 6 months and drop the other half. And I couldn't tell you, like, part of the interesting thing about that formula is I couldn't tell you when things are put together, right? Like it's not really clear if they film all 24 episodes and then they just drop 12 and 12, or if they film just 12, see what happens, then film the other. Like it's really kind of up in the air, like because there's been some shows that have gotten their second half put out there where you're just like, oh, I guess they just must have had these in the can, and just because otherwise the rest of it didn't seem to go so well. Whereas there's been other shows where you're just like, yeah, we never saw the second half of that, did we?
Yeah, Pretty Smart. Pretty Smart was one where you're like, yeah, they canceled that.
I would even point to something like Cowboy Bebop or something, right? Like where because that didn't land, we only got 10 episodes of that, which I cannot imagine that's all Netflix wanted from that series.
Well, especially that 10th episode ends in a cliffhanger.
Right. With like a cliffhanger
Crazy
introducing
Ed.
one of the big main characters. Yeah.
But it never felt like that was an A.
Man,
it felt like that was season 1. So
yeah, but just as an aside, I rewatched that the other day and I really liked that version.
It's really, really good. Like it's all Dale has seen and she loved it. And then there's part of me that's like, would she like the anime? Because
I think she would.
I definitely think she would. I think that everything about the anime is present in the show, and the way that they kind of like peeled stuff off and focused on things that didn't get focused in the original series. God, I mean the freaking not the Butterfly Man, the one where it realized that Ein was part of like the dog training with that with the assassin in the Netflix one. I'm like, Oh yeah, this was like a whole thing in the series. I
Well,
love that they
right.
just dropped it for like a one-off episode.
So like weird shit about the background of Cowboy Bebop. One of the coolest things about it that I always like fall back on in my actually knowledge of that shit is it's one of the few animes that I can think of where it wasn't based on an existing manga first, right?
Mhm.
So that what that means is they weren't kind of adhering to a manga to try and get the story out there. So what ends up happening a lot in those situations, I look at like Full Metal Alchemist in this regard, is that eventually they do so many episodes so quickly of the animes that they very often catch up to the manga, and then at some point they don't know what to do. So like with Full Metal Alchemist, they start kind of making shit up, and it doesn't quite line up what ends up happening in the story, and things get kind of out of whack. Also, pacing gets really weird, blah blah blah. So by not having a manga to adhere to, Cowboy Bebop is allowed to kind of create this world and just kind of do what it wants with it, and we get, I think it ends up being like three solid seasons out of that story, right? It might be four. It's been a long time since I've watched
Oh,
the
it's
series
only
in its entirety.
26 episodes though.
And maybe it's only two then.
So,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
But that idea being that like it creates this beautiful world and there's so many cool things to explore in it. When they do the live action version for Netflix, like they clearly feel like if this hits, we want to be able to explore so much more about this world. And so they're setting themselves up for all sorts of stuff that aren't necessarily in the original 26 episodes, but like that's okay. Like because there's only 26 episodes and there's a potential for there being more of that of this. I was all on board for that. And you just like people just get real weird and shitty. It's one of those shows that never had a chance though because like it was already getting shit on before it had even premiered.
Yeah,
So
exactly. It was, and the performances are really good. Like that was watching that show. I was nervous because of everything that was around it, and like I know that there's not going to be more, but I want to watch it because it's John Cho and they're characters that I like, and it's actors that I like, and I want to support.
I
this
like the
thing.
visual style. That's the thing that I love about it is like the ways in which it pays homage to the source material in the visual stylings and like the rhythm of shit. Like it just felt good. It felt tight.
Yeah. It's real enjoyable. It's a shame that it didn't go further. But that one, again, like, they were very obvious. We're doing one season, and if it hits, we'll do more seasons.
Right, exactly. So like it's easier to tell in those kinds of situations,
Yeah.
but it's not always, right?
Because pretty smart when you were like, yeah, I guess that's been canceled. I guess we're not getting the second half of season one. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I thought that there was just the one season. And then going and finding that they had been like, part two of season one coming. I'm like, oh, I no idea that was the marketing on this show at all.
It's
like,
weird. And so yeah, so that's how Netflix has kind of come to this like weird like middle ground on release schedules. But more and more people are kind of turning back to the weekly release stuff.
Yeah. And I mean, I bring it up because How I Met Your Father is how I kicked off. Well, that's not true. I kicked off this week with American Dad coming back. And I'm so happy that American Dad is back. I didn't realize how much I missed it until, like, I watched the new episode, which was full origins for Roger.
The last time it was on, wasn't that like the 2 year run of it where like it went 2 years every week with a new episode?
No. So the 2 year run had stopped, and then
Okay, the 2 year run.
and then they realized, yeah, we want to do that again. So they were off air after the 2 year. We're not going to miss an American Dad. They were off for about 7 months. There wasn't a new episode of American Dad. And then they're like, but there will be a new episode of American Dad through the end of 2022. And that's true. The last one that aired was The Grouch, which was a Christmas special where Roger became the Grouch because he became a prude, which was funny. It was a good episode of the show. He got married, and so he stopped having sex, and it made him turn into a Grinch-like figure. Good times. Good times, American Dad. And
awesome.
then I'm like, I can't believe there hasn't been new American Dad. And then when they announced that we're coming back on the 27th of March, I'm like, that's exciting. Wait, when was the last episode? And I'm like, oh, right. But they did. They were like, they had gotten to the point that they were doing new episodes and were able to release them the next week on Hulu. Because like there was a weird thing about how that was supposed to happen where like it needs to be X amount of things or how many episodes need to come out. So they couldn't go on Hulu before they aired, but then like just the wording of the contract meant that a week after they got to air on TBS and then once they aired on the Adult Swim that Sunday, they could go on Hulu because it still like fulfilled the 16 like the 16 episode goal of how much is supposed to come out at the time, because like they kind of A and B it, but it also was a broadcast show. It's a very strange, the contract for American Dad, which
I hope that we're not going to hear about weird like animator crunch with this kind of shit, because this is such a cool way for them to kind of break like the norm on how this stuff is released. But man, the amount of work that must be going in to get this shit out there. I'm glad to hear that they took such a long break between seasons, because that gives me hope that there was not like a lot of pressure to try and get shit out of it. But like, I think back to the anime stuff that we were just talking about.
Yeah.
One of the big things about anime is that with that kind of episode a week release, like sometimes episode a day, depending on which one you're talking about.
Sometimes, yeah.
Like, yeah, like the animator crunch that you would hear about on some of those shows was ridiculous.
I mean, to the fact that in Dr. Stone, once they start unfreezing more people, I don't know if you've ever watched Dr. Stone. It's one of my favorite animes now, and not just because the main guy and I share a birthday, but that was a cool episode. But it's the fact that one of the first people that, when they're like, the whole thrust of Dr. Stone is this fight between might and knowledge. Because, like, Suiku's the little kid, Senku, who the titular Dr. Stone, well, Dr. Stone is actually soap, but everybody would think of Senku as Dr. Stone based on how it's marketed. He is, like, the smartest person who ever lived, so he's all about knowledge and science, and even though our world turned to stone for 5,000 years, and now people are breaking out of their stone cocoons, I still think that science is the best path forward for humanity. And the other person who, one of the fourth person that they awaken, is the strongest, like, person who's the same age as Senku, because they're both like seniors in high school, but whatever they call that in Japan. And Senku was like the smartest senior in Japan, and he's the strongest senior in it. So it becomes this battle of brains and bronze, which is interesting. But then once that whole thing resolves, like, one of the first people that they unfreeze is someone who was a manga artist, because they knew that he would have a good work ethic. And he's like, I'm going as fast as I can. And they're like, yeah, it's fine. We're not upset about it. You're not doing manga anymore. But, like, look at how fast you're accomplishing things.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, never mind talking about like the manga side of the whole anime stuff, because that shit, they have to get like pages and pages out like every other day. Yeah,
it's an
and that's what I mean. Is I just hope that
thing.
we're not going to hear about some that kind of crunch on artists, because like more and more we're becoming, as an audience, more forgiving of that kind of stuff, I feel.
Which is yeah. I mean, I've still never played Red Dead Redemption 2 because of the crunch that was required on that one, and for the reasoning too. That
But the next time somebody out there says, "Hey, we're going to take some extra time because we don't want to do crunch," like, then that's awesome.
Go for it. Yeah, yes, and I have to imagine that even though they had done those 2 years of American Dad, it's not like they were doing them in real time. They had just said, we're not going to release another episode until we've done 2 years worth. Mm-hmm. And then, like, luckily, that covered them through most of COVID. And then it was the fact that, like, I'm sure that there were scripts being written during that time still. And, like, that 7 months was to be like, yeah, we want to make sure that they're done, that we have enough episodes so that we don't miss a week for the end of the year.
Yeah, or at least the first batch is done so that we've got time to start working on the second.
So it feels more like that they've learned some good lessons. Like, as bad as COVID was for production and things like that, I think because that one had the weird luxury of having this huge buffer, like a 2-year buffer is insane to have in animation.
Yeah, I know.
They were able to, like, look at it and
but when you keep getting pushed back for Olympics and Super Bowls and all of that shit, you end up with a large buildup of back episodes.
It's true. I mean, that's the even crazier thing. That, like, American Dad premiered during March Madness blows me away. And that an episode is airing against the Final Four championships. That, like, that's not going to be on a TBS channel is very weird to me. Though CBS paid for exclusive rights to all the finales, March Madness, in terms of, like, the rights to the games, is insanity to me. I don't really want to talk about it.
And
either, but,
and
like,
I'm not nuts. I'm not a big sports ball player, but I'm just a young country chicken. But there's this part of me that can't figure out if, because of the number of upsets this year with March Madness, if that means that it's going to be a more watched game, or if so many people's fucking brackets have been fucked that they're not going to watch, right? I made like a joke last week about like turning the bracket into a draft, and I've not stopped catching shit for that. um but I, in all honesty, like, as somebody that is not in this world and does not have any investment in it, I don't know if like the amount of broken brackets means that like people are just not going to watch, and maybe they're just banking on that, like, going up against the final four, or if they're actually shooting themselves in the foot because things are so weird this year that everybody's going to be watching it.
The other thing about American Dad is they do have that beauty of it is new on TBS at 10 o'clock on Monday night, but then it's also new the following Sunday. So, like, if you're somebody who misses it, but people talk about it, there's that. There's also, this is the thing for me, in the episode, Roger, it's like something on the professor, and Roger's going to be a college professor. And I only know about this because it's the episode that so much of the marketing for the new season was lifted from. So I've seen a bunch of scenes from it in commercials and things. But I don't know if it was in response to the marketing or not. Seth MacFarlane did an article where he talked about the fact that like COVID is not over, and he doesn't think that it's worth making a joke about and anything like that. And that's because one of the jokes in the adverts was Roger being like, I went 3 years avoiding COVID, and I'm glad to be out in the world again. And then he gets a text and it says that he's positive for COVID. Like, that's just a full scene that shows in the commercial. And Dale was like, I really wish, like, she was not a fan of American Dad from the early days, but she's definitely a TBS fan, which is also crazy when you think about the fact that, like, there are two fandoms of American Dad. Like, I really didn't understand that until we were hanging out with one of the people she used to work with at the aquarium, and she's like, yeah, she makes all these American Dad references. I don't understand because I've only ever watched it when it was on Fox. And I'm like, that's crazy. I never would have thought of that sort of delineation between the two versions of American Dad.
Well, I mean, you're talking about people that pay for cable and people that don't.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, that's what I mean. Like, that's where the split starts, at least, right?
Yeah.
Is like there are people out there that are, I mean, and it could be for a multitude of reasons. Some people just are straight up cord cutters, like my family. We don't have cable, so like if it was on TBS and not Fox, I was probably not going to be able to get a hold of it. Although I will say nowadays TBS is accessible in certain ways, but that was not always the case, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you can watch the new episodes of shows the week they air on TBS.com without having any sort of account.
But
you just have to watch commercials.
That does also put much more responsibility in the hand of the viewer to go seeking that stuff out versus it being just, hey, this is what's on this channel at this time, so fuck it. Like,
But that whole it's available on our website is one of the reasons why, even though they could have put it up on Hulu, it's like, no, we have exclusive like online rights for a week after it airs. And it's like, oh, okay, I didn't. It's just interesting things that happen there. But yeah, so that's a whole like other thing that I had never even considered with it. But like, so for Dale to be like, man, I really wish I had made that joke because, they've been really good about not making jokes about COVID in a lot of the Seth MacFarlane stuff. And then like the same week that they dropped that promo, Seth MacFarlane talking about, I don't think that COVID is a joke. I don't think that it's something that should be joked about. And it's just like, oh, okay, so this specific episode, which we know exists, which we've seen scenes from, if it's one that they wouldn't mind having buried, perfect to put it up against the Final Four.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
like,
yeah, no, I mean, I think it also goes to show that he's not always the end all be all voice behind that shit, it could be one of those things where he disagreed with it, but enough other people who were in the room to say like, yeah, we're doing it. But also, it's hard to work in fucking sound bites, because I think also at the end of the day, Seth MacFarlane would be the first person to talk to you about like the nuances of comedy, right? And about how sometimes a joke can work in one context that definitely doesn't in others. I think if anybody in this world could talk about how about trying to navigate that, right? It's like, right. So there's also something to be said about how like what you explained as what the scene is seems like it's very much a joke about the fact that COVID's not over. It seems to be very much in line with the first part of his sentiment
Yeah,
that like people are acting like COVID's over and it's still out there. Like and so like yep, that was what would happen to some idiot out there who's just acting like it's not.
yeah, like, oh, it's done now. I mean, I always said to Dale when like we were hearing that commercial, I'm like, it's also taking out of context. We don't know if the whole episode is going to be about that, which I doubt it. It seems like it's just going to be one of those things where, you know, I avoided it and now look at me. I'm out here again and it feels so good. And it's one of those things about, like, we need to watch the episode for the full context of the joke. It just
also,
felt
like,
very
it's weird
strange, the timing.
It's also really weird for a show that has always really prided itself on taking, you know, big swings at current events. Like they're not like ripped from the headlines so much, but they kind of are in a lot of their minor jokes. Like it's weird to cut yourself off from one of the biggest events in human history in the last 3 years to say we're not going to talk about this at all, right? Because we feel like it can't be addressed is a weird take, especially again from a guy that has never been afraid to have takes.
Right. But I think, again, we're talking about the nuance of comedy here. And he's like, I don't want to make fun of those people who got COVID a bunch of times, right? And I don't know. It's like with the Connors. Oh, God, I'm bringing up the Connors. That's always fun. Dale stopped watching the show when they made, like, COVID a part of the universe. Like,
Yeah.
COVID is a thing that happened there. Because she's like, I don't really want to watch it in my entertainment. And I have to say, it did kind of make that show feel more grounded. And when you think about what Roseanne was before it became the Connors, they would never shy away from looking at the dirtier, darker parts about like being a lower class family in America.
Sure, it was their bread and butter. Yeah.
Yeah. So it would have been weird if they didn't bring it up. And
Right.
it's not like they were making jokes about it all the time. I mean, they explained why Katie Seagal, right? Because this is just a Futurama episode, I guess, couldn't be there by the fact that she had COVID and was quarantining. So, like, but that's because Katie Seagal was off doing, I think, the Erin Brockovich show. I don't remember the name of the show where she played Erin Brockovich.
Yeah.
That may or may not be picked up by Freevee. Like they keep hinting that they want to do more of that, and I'm like, I think the boat has sailed, guys. I have to be honest with you. If you didn't drop it already, because like the cast on that show was a lot of people who just nope, no more. They're out doing other things now.
Yeah, they've got other irons of the fire type shit.
Like Kevin Zegers was on that show. He's now on Rookie Feds. I'm pretty sure James LaSure was on that show. He's now on Rookie Feds. And I think I've just unlocked like a memory on me there with realization. So yeah, like I don't think Freevee's actually going to do that. John Corbett was there, and he was in the finale of How I Met Your Father. So what are you going to do, guys? They're all gone. But they'll always come back for money. And do you have money, Freevee? I don't know. I don't know what you're doing.
They've got commercials.
They do have commercials.
So one would think there might be some cash involved there, but you know, who the fuck knows? But the way that accounting works nowadays.
Yeah. I don't know, but the whole thing that I was going down the line of with the A, the B is that How I Met Your Father has wrapped 2A of their series, and it felt like a good finale episode. Like the first 11 episodes of the second season of How I Met Your Father are out there in the world, which is weird that it's 11 episodes because that means that there's only 9 episodes left for the B half of the season.
They only get a 20-episode run.
They only got renewed for 20 episodes. So I thought it was interesting when I'm like, oh, it's 11 episodes for.
It could be the creators
one.
taking a swing at getting enough money for an episode 12
for another episode at the end, right? Who knows?
It's possible.
Yeah.
Well, this comes back to the conversation that we've had 1,000 times about this too. Is like when people get shitty about like Cowboy Bebop's a really good example of this. People get really shitty about a show getting canceled when they had a big cliffhanger ending. And it's like, you got to remember that these creators were not necessarily promised a second season. And they put the cliffhanger ending there in hopes to garner this support from you to spur this company into giving them a second season. But if they're not going to get a second season, you can't be shitty about the story not ending. You can't be shitty at the company that canceled them for the story not ending. Like, the good creator will give you a satisfying conclusion while still leaving the door open for more story to tell so that you can go on.
And
A shitty
Sam
creator
Beckett
will
never found his way home.
and a shitty creator will instead try and use your emotions to push their agenda with their boss. They will leave such an open ending that you are like, well, we need to have a second season, that you start a fucking Twitter campaign. And that is the creator using your sympathy to their advantage. And if you're okay with that, you're okay with that. I'm not making a judgment call here one way or the other, but you need to understand that that's what's happening in those moments, right? Is like, people are just like, oh, fucking Netflix canceled Cowboy Bebop. No, they just didn't renew, which I know is a conversation, a similar conversation, but it's a very specific nuance. It's not that they were promised a second season and they came in and said, no, we're cutting you off. It's that they were said, we'll see how this season does. And I have a sneaking suspicion it didn't do so well, so they didn't get renewed for a second season. And so to that point, like, this weird shit with the 2A 2B stuff, like, and this is a moment where it sounds like these creators took a big swing, and if something happens and they don't get more episodes, yeah, we're just going to end up with a silly 9 episode season that's going to feel a little rushed probably in moments and things like that.
So I can confirm that they only have the 9 episodes. Because,
so far.
Nope, I can confirm it because they have announced, Hulu has announced, the people who would be giving them the extra stuff, that the second half of season 2 will air from the 23rd of May through the 18th of July. So while you were giving a beautiful summation of how we should blame the creators when they leave us with an unresolved cliffhanger, not NBC for not letting us know who the father of Earl Jr. is, I still shake my fist at you, Greg. I was doing the count. So that is 9 episodes of the show. Now,
again, currently, they could it's Hulu isn't, they don't have to make room for more episodes, so they could decide literally on episode 9 that, like, hey, we'll take 10 and 11 for this part now, like, we'll put that order in now. They could do that if they want to,
right? And they released 2 episodes this past Thursday. They released 10 and 11 of season 2 for the, like, grand finale feel of it. That doesn't mean that there's not a 9 and a 10 coming on the 18th. Right. It is just one of those counts where they were very much, this is over, we'll be coming back on this and running through this, which I thought was interesting. And also I kind of liked because, yeah, you know how many episodes you have left, right? Be honest with us as the viewer and tell us how many we're going to get back at the end.
I mean, they're recreating the idea of destination viewing.
Yeah.
Like, this is the same shit as, like, Thursday night comedy on NBC. Is like they're letting you know the exact time and dates that you can come and sit down and watch your show.
Yeah. And honestly, it works for me with How I Met Your Father, because I have said many a time how I am right there at midnight on Monday into Tuesday to watch the new episode. And that's the other thing I like, is that Hulu knows we're going to put it on at midnight. I don't know if it's in your region or if it's based off of Eastern time, because I have the benefit of being in both of those situations. But it is really nice that it's not like 3 a.m. We're not basing it off of when it's midnight on the West Coast.
Yeah, it's a weird. With something like How I Met Your Father that is purely Hulu owned and produced, right? Like, it's not showing on, like, CBS and then being put up on Hulu, right? Yeah. So, like, they're kind of in that weird place. They're allowed to kind of do what they want with it. So I have to imagine that they'll release them at the same time, because if East Coasters get to watch it before West Coasters, you're talking spoilers, you're talking people that can put it up online in other places so that people don't have to watch it on Hulu all in a matter of 3 hours. They wouldn't risk that. The only time that ever really kind of happens is when it does have a TV premiere first, and so there is, like, some rule that, like, it can't be up in this market before this time because we need them to watch the TV version first. But, like, that is so rare nowadays that I don't know, I can't even point to an example of that nowadays.
Yeah. So who knows? And it's probably just that. If it goes live, that'd be even great. If you're on the Pacific Coast, you'd be watching it at 9 p.m.
Right, exactly.
That'd be awesome. and I'm now jealous of those people
I
because
mean,
then
that's what
they
happens with a lot of Netflix premieres. People are always wondering how people have like hot takes on things when they just woke up in the morning, and it's because like on the West Coast, it probably premiered at 8 o'clock at night, whereas it was midnight for everybody in the East Coast. You know,
right. Which I don't know the shift there. I know that like Netflix's premiere in the East Coast used to be 3 a.m. because it was based on noon on Pacific time. So
right?
that was one of those situations that I don't really know. That's cool though. I never even considered that until I was talking it through. But I have made How I Met Your Father destination viewing, and it's not for any like weird reason like, oh, what if it's ruined? What if something's spoiled for me? It's just like I've just made it part of my routine. And you know that I'm not even like the biggest fan of How I Met Your Father, but the weekly release schedule and the fact that it does feel like I know what I'm doing at midnight on Monday is watching How I Met Your Father.
I mean,
It's nice.
it's the same. It's the same reason why Netflix movies will premiere on Wednesdays and Fridays
Yeah.
because that's traditionally when movies premiere, and so that's when people are willing to make time for them. Like if they released it on a weird Tuesday or Thursday, they'd probably still get those viewings on Wednesday or Friday, but then, but of course, as we've always talked about, it's that first day numbers that always seem to matter for everybody. So like, yeah, it's this weird kind of archaic way that we kind of compartmentalize things in our brains. I feel like
Yeah.
is this need to kind of experience this thing. I will say that on shows not like How I Met Your Father, but like shows where there's like intrigue or mystery and like there's something to talk about. I like the idea of that week in between the viewing for like people to talk about stuff and you know theorize and things like that. But I don't know if I can't think of a big show that's really pulling that off right now. You know, we don't really have a Lost right now or an X Files.
Yeah, I think La Brea, weirdly, is the biggest one that does it. And the only reason I think that
Man,
is because of the marketing that La Brea is doing. Is
they're
make
trying really hard to push that, but that's the one all about how the people who fall under the tar pit go back in time, right?
right.
And like,
Yeah.
there's like two timelines going on in it where they're like trying to, in the future, figure out what happened to them, and in
In
the
the
past, they're
past,
just trying to survive.
yeah. It's
Yeah,
nuts.
they're. It's a very weird show. I will be honest. That show is like X Files that you watch at a bar, where like you and I say that as somebody that's really only watched La Brea sitting at bars, but it's the idea that you don't need to be picking up on every detail of the episode to kind of get what's going on. Whereas like you know on X Files there was a mystery, so like if you missed like a clue at some point, then maybe you weren't gonna get what was happening. But like La Brea doesn't want to hold its audience to that, so it's very much just like, oh, did you miss 10 minutes? Okay, that's okay. We'll
We'll
retell
tell you what
happened.
happened in those 10
Yeah.
minutes, those specific 10 minutes that you missed. They're
Yeah,
constantly
it's
recapping for everybody.
yeah, it's a wild show in that it's kind of a non-show
Yeah.
is really like, and I've only watched, like I said, a few episodes that I've seen while I've been out at bars, but
Mhm.
like I have no desire to go seek it out on my own after what I have seen of it.
Yeah. I like the woman that's in it. She was in The Following. I can't think of her freaking name right now. I could see her face. She was in The
La Brea is
Detour
not the kind
too.
of show that I would ever hold against somebody for being involved with in any way.
Oh
I
yeah.
just also have no desire to ever watch it.
And I mean, and the only reason that I bring it up is because there are the NBC clearly like distributed ads that are on like local radio
Yeah.
of like the voice that they've hired to be the voice of NBC talking about, and make sure you see La Brea because everybody will be talking about it tomorrow at the office.
I guess the last show that I kind of put in that vein would have been something like Once Upon a Time, where there was a lot of stuff where people were kind of figuring out what the mystery was at first, you know, trying to figure out who was who, and then eventually it turned into a guessing game of who would show up next,
Yeah.
right? So like it evolved in that way. That might be the last game that I can last game that the last show that I can think of that people literally talked around a water cooler like in front of me about the results of that show.
True Detective. Now, granted, this not over the air. It's HBO. It's all of that. That was the last one where I was in an office environment and people were talking about it on Monday. And it was one of those, if you
Yeah.
didn't see it, then it's going to be give for you. in the
I'll give you
office.
season one. After season
Oh
two,
yeah,
I
no,
think a lot
after
of people
season one,
shitting on
nobody.
that
It was
show, yeah.
season one with McConaughey and Harrelson,
Yeah.
where like, are you watching True Detective? Devon, go watch it.
And for the
'cause
record, I'm not saying I agree with those criticisms. I'm just pointing out that I doubt that was happening with season 2 and season 3. Unfortunately,
the exact conversation after season 2 started was, so I'm probably out of it. Yeah, me too. Yeah, me too. Like it was just like you could see the mass exodus from the show, and I'm just like, oof, that was poor True Detective. We were watching it for
great.
McConaughey, right? I've
I mean,
never,
season three was awesome.
I
I
haven't done it.
like
I haven't
season
watched it
two.
yet.
I like season two. It doesn't feel like a true detective show. It feels like it's its own thing, and then season three feels very much like it's just season two of True Detective.
Yeah, they're
But yeah,
ones that I never went back to. I'll be honest with it. You know, the other one that people used to talk about, which I can't believe is still a show, is The Blacklist. Remember The Blacklist with James
I
Spader?
okay, I loved the first three seasons of that show. Like legitimately would sit down destination viewing when they would premiere and then go up on Hulu. Like me and my roommate at the time were very invested in it. Spader was huge and like we would joke about like the like daddy vibes he's given up that whole time. The main actress in it, I kind of fell in love with for a minute there. She had a couple of other projects. Wasn't she this like sister on Chuck or something like that? She had like some other role that I was like really into.
I don't know.
But the big one was the boy toy in the first season, who is now on that nursing
New
show,
Amsterdam, which is
New
actually finished.
Amsterdam.
That show ended.
His fucking like back and forth turn in that first couple of seasons like was phenomenal. Like
Yeah.
not like oh my god nobody's ever acted like this before, but for like a junky little like Monster of the Week style show where they would go after like it. You know how in serial killer shows it turns out there's just hundreds of serial killers in the world that we just didn't realize. This is like that, but for spies. We
Yeah.
didn't realize that everybody
Everyone's a
out there is,
spy.
is a
Yeah.
spy. Yeah, yeah. And so like after a while it got to be kind of like okay everybody in this world is just not who they say they are, and so like I kind of got turned off from it, but yeah the fact that it's still going is just pretty wild.
That was the same thing for me, but that all happened in the first season. Where I'm just like, I can't deal with this. I feel like you're just straight lying to me. I
Yeah,
can't.
yeah.
I'm not gonna let you lie to me every week. The Blacklist. I don't
Oh,
care.
there's a
I
show that
don't
canceled
care.
too early.
Which one?
Lie to me. Anyway, we
Oh, why the wounds? They're still fresh.
you know there were like things that we were going to talk about this week.
Were there? I don't. I've talked about everything I wanted to talk about this week so far. Wanted to
Well,
talk
let's
about
shift
how
some
much
gears though. Let's
Murder
turn our
Mystery
little
2.
steam
That's the
powered
last
engine.
thing. Sorry.
Okay, yeah, we could talk about Murder
We don't
Mystery
need to
2 and
talk.
stay in the streaming world.
Have you? No, I don't. Have you seen it yet?
No, I have not. I thought we were going to do like a whole thing for the show, so I
Oh, we're
for
gonna do it for this. We're gonna do it for
so
ASCU too. But
yeah, so
I couldn't because of the ASCU. I've already been fielding. So what'd you think, Devons? So I had to like. It was Friday night. I'm like, guys, don't make other plans. We have to watch Murder Mystery 2.
also the other thing is that we're in Passover mode over here, so we're
Right,
going to
right,
be
right, right.
kind of yeah, we're a little busy doing things like cleaning out the entire freaking kitchen.
Yeah, there's nothing but yeast in Murder Mystery 2 as well. So
How gross! I don't even want to know.
it's definitely a leavened movie. So, sorry. No. It's been an hour of Devon. Let's switch gears to the Sejohn show, which is not how the show usually works. This is the stuff I wanted to talk on. So what you got, Siege?
No, I just it's been it's been a little bit of a slow week because I'll be honest, I'm waiting for Mario to come out next week. That's like the big thing that I'm kind of holding on to all of my chips for. No, I mean we've talked before about like going out to movies and stuff nowadays is not something that we do on the reg like we used to. You know, like
Right.
the fact that it needs to be an occasion. So I haven't really done much in the movie regard because I'm saving up the movie energy in my energy budget for Mario next week. And then the same thing goes in like games and stuff is like I haven't really dedicated myself to any particular like gaming thing or TV thing because like I'm just kind of waiting on stuff. The Tears of the Kingdom 10-minute like playthrough was like fun and got me super excited. So now I'm just like, okay, well, I'll see you in May, I guess. So I got 2 months here where I'm just gonna or a month and a half, I guess, at this point, where I just gotta sit on my hands before I'm playing video games again.
Oh, I have so many games I want to get done before then, so that I can dedicate to it. But
Yeah, I just kind of I've hit kind of a stopping point with a lot of the games that like I've been trying some stuff. You and I have been talking about me like dipping into some older things like Wind Waker and Paper Mario and stuff. But like I'm not getting invested majorly in something because I can't stop thinking about that 10-minute playthrough of Tears of the Kingdom.
I can't stop thinking about it either, but mostly because of how friggin' awkward it was.
Yes, no, all I keep thinking is, man, I really wish I could have been the one playing it for 10 minutes because I would have done this and I would have gone there. Not that I would have been quote unquote better than what was shown in the video, but what I'm saying is like what I wanted to see more of, like, or what I would have wanted to experience from that thing. I was like, oh, man, like go there. No, 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 go okay, like try like see what you can do with this. You know, I want you to fuse all the things.
Yeah, no, I feel where you are there, and that's good. That's actually that means that they succeeded in what
Yeah,
they were doing.
for
Because
sure,
if
yeah.
you watched that and you're like, I want to do this, why are you not doing this? Like that's when they're like, well, you can do that on May 12th.
Yeah.
Uh,
For $70.
yeah. Um,
Casual reminder that Nintendo did start their voucher program this year, and Tears of the Kingdom is the perfect game to experiment on that with for the first time.
I gotta get a physical copy of it, which is lame. I know that because I'm not gonna be able to play it until probably like 9 o'clock on the Friday
Yeah.
that I have off. I did take the day off, so I'm excited about that. I was able to secure a pre-order on the OLED Switch, Zelda style, which feels like, yeah, now it's time. It's time for me to get this.
I'm excited. I'm excited for you to have the OLED. I love
Um,
mine.
so like, there's that excitement there. I really do wonder how much of my issue with that 10-minute preview of Tears of the Kingdom was based on the translator. Because I don't feel like the guy who was playing the game was being quite so campy and, like, I'm going to say childish, but, like, I mean that more in, like, the wonderment and things like that. Like, if it honestly felt like the translator might have been injecting certain inflection with the way that he was speaking. And that is more where I bothered it. Like, oh, what happens if we get this? It's a fan. And it's
I
just
will
like,
let me try putting it this way and see if this lands. It felt very disingenuous, and it's hard to separate that disingenuous nature from what the translator is bringing to the table versus what this who
the
was
guy
it that was
playing
playing?
it.
We keep not talking about
I
it
don't know.
wasn't the president of Nintendo.
Well, the president of Nintendo America is Doug Bowser. I don't know who that guy
Not
was.
Nintendo America. Why would
But it wasn't the president of Nintendo of America. That's not who Doug Bowser is? Isn't he the new Reggie Fils-Aimé?
No. I'm saying that was clearly not. Who
Oh,
was
no, that's
playing
not
in
who
the
that
video.
was. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm telling you, the only person whose name I know is Doug Bowser. Because you have to imagine that's the only reason he got the job. Right?
He worked his way to the top, and he's gonna tear it down from the inside out.
Roar! That's my Jack Black as Bowser.
Yeah,
voice.
but it's Ig Eonuma, I think is how you say his last name. But yeah, as they were playing, like there's definitely moments where they were trying to inject this feel of discovery, but if you're to believe that this guy is supposed to be this higher up responsible of this game, the fact that he would be discovering these things feels a little, as I said, disingenuous. Let's put it that way. Yes.
And then
So in that regard, for sure, I'll be honest, I have yet to watch the video with the sound on. I've been like at work while it's been playing and things like that, so I've just been watching like the visual aspect of it and like seeing like the cool shit that you can do has been awesome.
because Dale and I wasn't going to watch it. Like, I'm just like, I know I'm getting the game. I don't need to know to want to do it. But then it was just there. Like, we just needed to kill 10. We literally needed to kill 10 minutes before How I Met Your Father. That's the truest thing that I can say. Is it was 10 minutes to How I Met Your Father. So I'm like, let's just put on the Zelda video, right? It'll just be background noise. And then the way he's like, oh, what's this? I can put a rock on the tree branch? And now it's stronger than it was before. And I'm just
It sounds like an episode of Dora the Explorer.
yeah, it was. I'm just like, and there was a solid minute where Dale and I just stared at the screen, like mouths agape, like, this is what you're doing. This is how you're selling the game.
I mean,
'Cause,
again, we have to keep in mind that there is a style of translation where the idea of that kind of like monotone, easy listening, take in, like that is just kind of this is the lowest common denominator version of this voice for this sort of thing, right? And I think that that's important to get across to as many people as possible because I can guarantee you that like my parents watching that video would not be picking up on any of this shit.
That's a good point. It just was. there really was like, oh, what's this? And he hits the fan, and he's like, it's a fan. And I'm like, I really feel like the president of Nintendo wasn't like, he was probably like, and these are fans. And then he hits it and shows it off, and he's like, what if we put these on the back of the boat to give it momentum? Like I feel like the way that he was talking was more of that Japanese monotone where like there was no emotion. So then to hear the emotion from the translator was just very strange.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm excited to play the game. I still think it's going to have a lot of the problems that I had with Breath of the Wild, but I mean, they are addressing my biggest issue, which was that things break. Because as soon as he was fusing stuff, that stuff was lasting much longer.
Yeah, the idea that you can kind of on the fly kind of do a repair, and the thing is probably you can't fuse beyond that, right? Like you fuse it once and that's kind of it. So you've kind of really, you still have to run up against that same time. Eventually, that thing is going to break, but you can extend it in these kind of in these ways.
Well,
and,
I mean,
and what's going to be
yeah. Well, Tree Branch plus Rock gave him something that like could kill two of the little constructs without even having like any show of damage. Like it wasn't even flashing red, where like a single tree branch on its own was breaking in 3 hits.
Yeah, right. So it does make it a much more durable, but like I have to imagine that at some point like that tree branch and rock thing will still break. Right.
And
like,
that's fine, but increased durability to like that level was not something I was expecting.
I again would point out you could just throw a rusty blade at an Octorok and get the same level of increase in durability on things in Breath of the Wild. It's just that it was not like an on-the-fly button press. So like, yeah, like definitely bringing, kind of trying to still strike a balance on the durability thing while still maintaining the concept of durability is important, because I think one of the biggest parts of Breath of the Wild that makes it Breath of the Wild is that durability issue. Like I think having to navigate that particular puzzle of the game is important.
Which I guess this is where I'm going to reveal to everybody, if you want to join in, I will be replaying Breath of the Wild on April 28th. That'll be when I set into it, and maybe explore Sejohn's theory there about durability as part of that game. It makes sense. Every time he says it, I'm like, he's probably right. And like,
I'm not saying that's going to make you change your whole view on it. You can still like not be cool with the idea of like durability. It's just that like that is a core mechanic in that game. So like if that's not a thing that you're into, I don't think Tears of the Kingdom is going to do it for you. Like, yes, they've created this fusibility that's going to like kind of help in that regard, and I think that's cool. But I do still think there's still going to be durability like to consider. Like, I don't think you'll be able to fuse things indefinitely so that you never have to worry about durability.
Oh yeah, no, and I don't think that he was like. I think once a tree branch broke, it was broken. It wasn't like you could hold on to the pieces and refuse it into a tree branch or fuse the broken branch with a rock to give it something.
No, yeah. So
you
the
need
bigger
to be
thing
smart
is going
beforehand.
To become, right. The bigger thing is going to become like what's happened to the Master Sword at this point and things like that. Like what is the narrative explanation for why you don't have all your badass shit from the end of the first one, which is what I'm really curious about, because again, this is one of the few times that we're looking at a completely direct sequel from one Zelda to the next, right? And there's a lot of stuff that happened in Breath of the Wild that I'm curious what the reason is you don't have access to them in this story. So I don't know.
Why does Link have gross Mosenroth hand? Right? Mosenroth? Is that a reference that anybody got? Do you know who that is?
No.
The Aladdin television show, right? The 65 episode Aladdin animated series introduced they never got to explore it, but there was a pretty good chance that he was going to be Aladdin's like half brother in some way, shape, or form. Like they were going to be related. And he was basically an anti-Aladdin, where instead of like having the toned body and that stuff, he used his mind and magic in order to fight. And he wore a gauntlet on his right hand. Then in one episode, Aladdin took it off, and underneath his gauntlet, it revealed to be a skeleton hand, because the gauntlet was slowly devouring him every time he used the magic. So as soon as I saw Link's like decrepit right hand, all I thought of was this character Mosenroth from the Aladdin animated series.
Yeah, yeah, and that's something that will obviously be addressed in game
In
because it's
game,
like
yeah.
there and it's present. My thing is the stuff that was just not there that on
Yeah.
screen that I'm just like, why would this not be there? And so I'm just curious to see what the narrative reason
So,
is
but
for
I
all
guess
of it.
my narrative reason that I think they're going to be linked to be a
Hmm.
total fucking asshole and use the word Link there. I think that Link has that gross, like, decaying hand because of whatever happens to the things that he's lost.
Yeah,
Like he's holding the Master Sword when it's struck by some sort of necrotic lightning.
yeah, the
And
Master Sword's not even the
yeah,
thing I'm even talking about anymore.
you're
There's
talking
some
about
other
like Sheikah
stuff.
Slate stuff.
No, I'm talking about like all of the powers that he gained from the Guardians and shit,
Oh,
and
no,
why that
those go
stuff's not
back.
present.
That's how magic works, Sejohn.
They very distinctly at the end of that game do not. There is a very distinct moment about him being the hero and all of that.
Once the threat of Calamity Ganon was gone, the power and magic went back to its hosts to rest until it was necessary again. Much like the Zords at the end of every episode of Power Rangers.
Yeah,
I know that that's not true at all, Siege, and I'm just being an asshole.
I did. Yeah, I'm just letting you gotta sit in it. Go ahead.
I'm going to have diaper rash from my bad takes.
Oh god.
Bad take diaper rash. You know, I am excited for the game now in a way that I
Yeah,
wasn't before. Like I finally put in my pre-order for the game, and
yeah.
yeah,
I don't. There seems to be a weird contingency of people online, and it's not a very large one, but a lot of people that are just like, "Oh, it's just Breath of the Wild 2," and it's a very weird reaction.
that is the
I,
reaction to. I've never understood that. Like the Mega Man games, where they're like, "Oh, it's
yeah.
just like Mega Man," and it's like, "Yeah, it's a sequel to Mega Man." What do you if it's not too much like the game that it's a sequel to, you'll also be upset.
Yeah, we kind of Dale and I kind of got into this conversation with the Pokemon thing because like historically that's been always the problem, is that the major problem that people have really pointed to is that they feel like those games have just not to get kind of punny for a second evolved, right? Like this idea that they have not grown up. And I don't know, it's just weird. I mean, like part of it is because like when they tried to completely change the formula with Wind Waker, they got shit on. When they tried to completely change the formula with Twilight Princess, they got shit on. So like there's nowhere to win with this kind of shit, right?
Yeah. And even then, the at its core in both of those switches of the mechanics in a Zelda game, they were still very much Zelda games.
Well, and I mean like stylistically is really where
Yeah,
those games
yeah.
are real shit. But like that idea being that that at its core there is still a Zelda game there, and I do feel that's true with Breath of the Wild. I think like at its core, I just think that what it is that and I've said this before, but I'll keep beating this drum, is that it's more about the meta of Zelda, and like this is just what we do nowadays, right? Is we've gotten so deep down the rabbit hole on some of these franchises that it's no longer about like, well, what makes a Zelda game, and you can point to some physical things. But the problem is that if you keep doing those physical things over and over and over, people say, well, you're not doing anything innovative. Now, if you look at the meta game and you go, well, okay, this is the core to the meta game of a Zelda game, but then like that allows us to have things like, oh, durability on weapons actually fits into this. And actually, it's not the first time durability has been in a Zelda game. It's been there for the last 3 or 4 games, actually. Like the idea of shit breaking has been in there since Skyward Sword.
Yeah, but nobody played
Um,
Skyward Sword. I kid. Of course I kid. But
but like, and like all that kind of shit is, it's like, well, okay, so as long as we stick to the idea that Link picks up a couple of basic tools in the beginning and it allows him to explore, and then as he goes along he picks up powers, abilities, or tools that allow him to go back to places and re-explore things and get to different parts of it, like that is all part of Breath of the Wild. And like you can cheat those systems for sure, or not. You can just play the game and go along with it. It's like the lack of dungeons is definitely something that and like good bosses is like one of the things that I definitely lament in Breath of the Wild. And I hope that Tears of the Kingdom is able to maybe do some more in that regard. But I was just watching a video the other day where a guy was talking about quote unquote overworld bosses. And the idea being that while the Calamity Ganons that you face are kind of a letdown, like you can't forget that there's all of the Cyclops dudes you can go up against. There's this thing in the desert that's going around that you can go up against. There's like these weird little mini like like boss battle things throughout that are just like everywhere. And I was like, oh shit, yeah, there's like these two huge mazes that you can get, labyrinths that you can get like lost in and stuff like that are really cool and dungeon-esque, and like there's some of their puzzles and things like that. So like those elements are there. They're not placed in a place where we expect them, and so people talk about them as being absent. But the truth is like they are in this game. It's just that they decided like, why do they have to be the main thread of this game? And I think they learned, well, they have to be because it's what motivates a lot of people to keep playing. So I'm hoping that they find a little bit of a better balance in Tears of the Kingdom.
Yeah, I agree. That is my biggest issue is because as much as the infernal beasts or whatever they're called are like representative of the dungeons, they never really felt dungeon-esque to me.
And especially because they all feel very similar. Like if they had all been one thing and like that was just the theme of that dungeon, that would have been rad. But to have it be spread out and be 4 different dungeons that are all run to this thing, slam your Sheikah Slate down, run to the next thing, it just, in this one you have to freeze the water, in this one you have to raise the water, in this one you have to melt the water. It's like, okay.
Yeah. It's they were cool, and then all of the shrines, and I know that the shrines had different things. Again, them all having the same aesthetic kind of makes them blend together, I think, in a way to people. Yeah. And I don't know. And they're clearly part of it, because I was thinking about, all right, if I'm replaying the game, what are the things I got to do? And I'm like, well, you can't just ignore the shrines. I could ignore the shrines, but I do still want to be able to build up my stamina and my hearts. Yeah. And I know like what's required to do that is to complete shrines. So...
or cook the right meal.
See, I don't explore that. Like, there's so much in the game that I didn't do because, I mean, that game came out when I was in like the height of my Link to the Past mode. And I have very clearly like shuffled that off. I don't think I've played Link to the Past in about a year. That's not necessarily true. I am walking a friend through a randomizer right now, where hopefully we'll finish that in the next couple of weeks so that I will have that done beforehand. But like, I have not played and gone through one in a very long time. So I hope that my mind is more keyed in to get to experience Breath of the Wild as something different. I mean, the other problem with Breath of the Wild, and this is totally a Devon issue, is the fact that it feels a lot like Skyrim. And that is a game that just never connected for me.
I mean, I think you mean open world RPG, because I feel as much I feel as much Fallout in it as I do Skyrim, as I do like basically any GTA. Like there's some really wonderful moments that feel very ridiculous in like getting the mechanics to work together. That feels like it's just GTA Online sometimes.
Yeah, see, and it's just because Skyrim honestly was the only one that I had played like that, and I haven't even played it. I've watched people play it. That's where my mind went to. Though I will admit, like, the towers felt very Far Cry 4, because I had played
or Assassin's Creed, or
Well, I haven't played that. Like, like you could talk about the other games, but if I've never touched an Assassin's Creed, I'm not going to think, oh, this reminds me of that game. Like, it's weird. It's strange. How have I never played an Assassin's Creed? Is that true?
Yeah, I don't play new games, Devon.
That's hurtful, truthful things with Siege and Sarawak. But yeah, so that was an exciting moment too. I forgot about it, but then I was more excited about Tetris, and I want them to bring back Super Mario 35 for the Mario movie. I know they're not going to, but now I've yelled it out into the ether. I also would be great if there was a stealth drop of a new Mario game that was like the game. I feel like
we're really missing an opportunity here. There's been a lot of weird missed opportunities with this movie in terms of the marketing aspect of it. Like between the fact that they're not doing anything video game related that I can tell, the fact that there's not that they completely fucking whiffed the McDonald's toy drop and they came out in like December of last year. Like
I know, I was looking at all of them like, soon, my pretties, I'll have context for all of you.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's
been some really wild shit that's happened with the marketing on this movie.
The toys dropping 2 months before the movie came out was another weird one.
Yeah,
like to the fact that they're now clearanced at Target, It's
Right.
like, that's so weird. Like, I understand that they're taking up shelf space, but they're taking up shelf space because the kids have not seen the movie yet to go, Mom, Dad, can I buy this? It's like the movie that I saw.
Yeah,
Like,
I know. It's wild.
it's
I don't think
so.
this movie's gonna do well, Dev.
I mean,
I'm
they're.
really, I'm really disappointed because I don't think it's gonna have anything to do with the quality of the film. You know, good or bad. I think that this movie's not gonna do well based on everything that's happened around it.
Well,
Maybe I'm wrong. I hope the world can prove me wrong.
I know that I have my outfit all picked out for it. I'm very excited to go see the movie because of the shirt I'm going to be wearing, which is the album artwork from our last very special episode looking at the original Super Mario Brothers film.
Yeah, and I want to reiterate a point from that episode that we talked about. Like the idea that like I've just since we recorded that episode, I have really been digging into the wild worlds of Mario. Just like how much weird shit we have let Mario be over the years, and the fact that there are people out there that are looking at this video and trying to like scrupulously like tear apart like elements of it to figure out if they are truly Mario-esque or not, and talk about all the ways that like, oh, he wouldn't behave in this way, or oh, this thing wouldn't happen, or these two characters wouldn't talk to each other. Like just the weird the level of which people are going to try and criticize this film for not being a quote unquote good Mario movie is just completely out the fucking window for me, because as we mentioned in that episode, Mario has become so many things to the point where that Mario 93 movie doesn't actually feel like it's that bad of an interpretation of Mario. There's shit that happens in that movie that I am convinced affects later Mario games.
Oh yeah,
Right?
definitely. Well, we
Yeah,
mentioned
yeah.
it, right? I mean, go
Right.
listen to the episode, but there's a reason he was sliding in Super Mario 64. Pretty sure it happens in that movie. Pretty sure it
It's just
happens
so
in that
crazy that
movie.
like that like people are so like hell bent on what they think a Mario game is. Meanwhile, my favorite Mario game of the last like 5 years was Mario Rabbids, followed very closely by Mario Rabbids 2: Spark of Hope.
That's weird. I'm glad to hear someone finally passed that. You do think the first one is better than the sequel? A lot of
Um,
people really liked the free movement of the sequel.
I will say that it's I think it's just a fucking well-rounded experience altogether, because I think there's pros and cons to each. I think two, it has some really amazing stuff in the movements and stuff. I think the story to one is much more fun. Like what's going on in two is very dark and cool and edgy and stuff like that, but like it doesn't allow for a lot of the same level of like dumb Mario jokes. Like there isn't a moment where Donkey Kong Bunny shows up, or you know what I mean, like Rabbit shows up. There's not a moment where a Wario and Waluigi Rabbit show up in
Sparks
the
of Hope.
second one.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you do get to play as Bowser in Sparks of Hope, and that's fucking badass. Like there's benefits to both, but like I think I'd really always have to lay. I mean, like, at the end of the day, when you're saying that, I have to kind of then bow to just the chronological order, because we wouldn't have had two without one. So like at that point,
I mean, that doesn't. There's. I mean, I've been experiencing that a lot with Murder Mystery because a lot of people are saying that they really liked the first one compared to the second one, and I am staunchly the second one is just more fun than the first movie.
that's awesome.
And
That's cool
that,
to hear. But what I'm saying is like I think that they are both
like,
equally good. So if I had to put them on a list, then I
then
would
you do it
chronologically
chronologically.
put
I
one
get that. Yeah,
first. Yeah, that's all I'm saying.
I get that. I just, yeah, because a lot of those questions about Murder Mystery 2, I'm like, no, I thought it was better than the first movie. And like, I don't know. I re-listened to us talk about the first movie, and we weren't necessarily down on it, but it was more the fact that like this really doesn't fit into the thesis that we're putting together with Adam Sandler movies.
Yeah.
So like, it feels weird to be talking about it. We were so young back then in our 8th episode of the ASCU. And that, yeah, so that was a lot of the thought. But I mean, I was excited about it. But that is an interesting thing. How much credit do you have to give to the original when considering how much you enjoy a follow up or a sequel? Right? Because I
There
don't think
were
anybody would
so
say.
right. So if you play the first Mario Rabbids, there's a lot of referential humor to just the worlds of Mario. And so like it's kind of like fun for everybody. If you play Sparks of Hope, there's a lot of referential humor to Mario Rabbids. So like it's much more specific in the jokes that it's making. Like the humor that it takes on in the second one is much more like a humor of its own, which is great because it's maturing as a series and like they're building the world out and all of that sort of good stuff. But it does very much make the enjoyment of that game very dependent on your enjoyment of the first one. It's not to the point where I think it's like gonna hurt the game in any way if you haven't played the first one, but there are gonna be bits and jokes and things like that that you're gonna miss where you're like, why am I watching this rabbit take selfies for 10 minutes? And it's like, oh well, the bit in the first movie, it's fine. It's like it just becomes this thing where like it's now referencing itself, so it's kind of just dependent on you knowing itself.
I get that. That's kind of cool. I guess that's why I didn't feel completely lost. I mean, I stopped playing. The biggest issue with the Rabbids games is the Ubisoft of it all for me.
Yeah,
like
sure.
it's a company that, I mean, the big reveal. I can't believe we're waiting until almost 90 minutes into the episode to talk about this. Scott Pilgrim is getting an anime on Netflix, and the full fucking cast is back.
Yeah,
that is a real thing that is happening. That was not an April Fool's joke. Though they did release the information quite close to April Fool's, so you could be forgiven if you thought it wasn't really happening.
Yeah, yeah.
And one of the ways that they celebrated that is that the game is on sale for like $4 across a bunch of platforms. And that Scott Pilgrim game, I mean, is one of the reasons why I was willing and ready to jump into the River City Girls stuff. Was like, River City Girls looks like it's kind of a follow-up to the Scott Pilgrim game. Granted, it's actually getting to exist in the world of River City now, as opposed to Scott Pilgrim, which just felt very influenced by River City Ransom.
Yeah.
Yeah,
purposely so. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
like that was that was what they were trying to do. But like just knowing that Ubisoft is going to be getting some of that money, I just don't want to support that company because of their practices and the way that they treat their employees.
That's fair, man.
Yeah.
Stick to your guns on that shit. I just,
yeah, no, and
I will always be the first person to point out that like we should then look at all other companies the same way.
And that's one of the reasons why is the fact that like I haven't played Red Dead Redemption 2 because of what happened there. I don't get to pick and choose, right? And I guess somewhere down the line, at some point I do break. The secret at the end of the day
is you do get to pick and choose, and that's the kind of the point of the whole thing is like.
Yeah, yeah.
And again, I have also come down on the fact that like there have been certain games in this regard where it's felt like, oh, I don't really know if I want to support this kind of thing, and then artists of the game have come out and been like, guys, we've already did the work. Like I'd rather you play this thing now and just maybe like we just make sure that this is just out there for people to be aware of, but like. Because not buying the thing also then potentially puts those artists at risk of then being out of work when the thing doesn't sell, right? And so like it's this weird kind of balancing act you need to do where you want to support artists in some way. And I think that one of the best ways you can do that is things like buying direct anytime that you can, anytime you don't have to go through like an Amazon or a PS store or something like that, or even limited run in those regards. If you can go directly to an artist and support them, if you can find out if your favorite game artists are doing maybe other work, maybe support them in that stuff when you're not buying their game, like there's just if like being a smart consumer, totally on board for that. Being an ethical consumer, definitely. It's just that like you need to make sure that doesn't just end at what the latest headline is for like what like where I'm not going to buy this game because this particular company is just in trouble right now, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, more with Ubisoft, the fact that they've never really been in trouble for the stuff that they've done regarding sexual allegations and such.
Mm-hmm.
That is just like, it's just a thing that we all accept from Ubisoft because they build the tower games where we climb the tower and we get our map filled in with things to do.
Yeah, I mean, there's also been a lot of stuff out there though that is broken down that like Ubisoft Montreal is not necessarily the same as like Ubisoft Europe, which is not necessarily the same. So like the question becomes like, well, do we have this kind of culture just inbred in the entirety of the company, or is it just this particular area of this company? And so again, you gotta make sure you're digging in.
Yeah. This is good. This is a good thing to remind people of, and that's all. There's always a good thing to come up when we're talking about things on the Say Report. Is that?
Well, yeah, and as I said, like this is not like an all sides do it, so it's not worth fighting thing. It's just that you need to be aware that like we're talking about Ubisoft doing it because that's the hot button one to point to, but like we also know this kind of shit happens at like Rockstar and stuff like that. So,
right. And it's specifically the two big ones that I know that I'm like, I'm just going to avoid their games. Yeah. I'm avoiding Activision Blizzard. I did a double down sandwich. I did a KFC double down, and I didn't know that with that came access to the Diablo 4 beta. And I'm like, oh, I kind of want to do it, but then I'm like, no, you know what? Like, I really don't agree with Activision or Blizzard, so I'm not going to. So I haven't done that. Like, that's the big one for me. Ubisoft is another one, and then the third one is Rockstar, right? I keep forgetting
Yes.
that. I don't know.
Yeah, no, not
Yeah.
Rocksteady, not the guys that make the Arkham games, but Rockstar. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure Rocksteady probably. Well, I'm not going to say that, but maybe they've been squeaky clean. But I'm sure if somebody found some issues with them, that would also be because it's the video game industry. So
I don't know. I've
like,
played Arkham Knight. I have to imagine that. Oh, I don't know. I don't know. There's nothing there. I'm just making a joke about the original state of Arkham Knight when it came out.
on PC, to be clear.
Yes, to be
which
seems to be just the issue.
Which is Iron Galaxy, which has now had the Last of Us issue this week that they've been dealing with. So
yeah, maybe we just I'm so ready to move on to just being a PC guy. Like, it's gotten to that point for me where the games that I play tend to just be little indies that I could play on any system. It doesn't really, like, I can't remember the last PlayStation exclusive I lined up for and was ready to play.
RE4? No, that's not an exclusive.
No, that's not exclusive.
But
with the fact that the speed runs are on
Yeah,
PC, so.
And I will point out that, as I just said just a moment ago, one of the best ways that you can kind of really combat the shitty practices of the industry is buying direct from indie artists.
Yeah.
So, like, by not going through a PS store where they get a cut or something like that, but instead going someplace where you can buy direct from them. You know, Steam probably is not a great example because they also still get a cut, but it's not on the same level.
It's not as high, yeah, but
right. But yeah, like, but any chance you can do to do that kind of stuff with small indie artists, like, do that shit. Go to their Patreons or go to their web pages and shit.
Yeah. So it's just there where, but then I look at, like, the games, like, if there were a big game that I were going to get on PC, like, what are the chances it's going to be a Resident Evil 4? Where, like, that game on PC looks gorgeous and actually has, like, real graphical options. Like, the actual graphical options that are available on the PC version compared to the PS5, it blows me away. It blows me away that if you turn on HDR on your PS5, it's like, yeah, so all the HDR settings, those are set. You can't mess with those. And it's like, yeah, but, like, from the people Capcom, they're like, yo, you shouldn't use this filter. You shouldn't use the filter that the PlayStation locks you to when you turn on HDR. Resident Evil 4, I finished it. I completed the game. I have started a second run through, but I wasn't as gung-ho to do it as I was with 2 or 3's remakes.
Sure.
And I'm bummed about that. I will be completely honest with you that, like, not having that immediate drive to replay the Resident Evil game felt very disappointing.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that I'm surprised you, like, I would celebrate the fact that you finished RE4, I think probably for the first time.
First time ever finishing RE4.
Right? Like, the fact that the remake was at least enough to get you to the end of RE4 is interesting to me, so.
Cool, I'm glad. Well, I got to the end of it, and I don't know. It's so long. The game just feels like it goes on forever. And there's a little bit of me, and it does not have any strength or power right now, but there is a part of me that's like, I feel like I have to play the original now because I need to know what was added. Like, is the first Resident Evil 4 just the original version of it just as long as shit? Does it feel like it goes on forever? Because the game just feels like it goes on forever.
I will say RE3 pretty infamously has a short runtime on it, like an extremely short runtime.
Yeah.
It's part of it's one of the first games I remember people being kind of pissy about having to pay a price for and it not having the kind of replayability or length that something like RE2 did. So like I remember that being one of the first times people talking about Nemesis and being kind of pissed that they paid full price for a game and it didn't give them the time that they felt they deserved for that price. And again, I'm not somebody that attributes themselves to that specifically. Like I obviously if I feel like I don't get enough for my money, I'll say something, but like I don't think that time is like I don't think there's a measurable amount of time you should be given just because you spent $60 on a game or $70
Oh
on a
yeah.
game. But there should be a quality there that makes up for any lack of quantity, right? Um, and
Well,
and so I think that's where the RE3 remake kind of really made up for it because I do think that there was the same thing going on where people were getting through RE3 much quicker than we saw people getting through RE2, and like, but there was a replayability and there was a mastery of that game that people really got into. I'm sure that we will also see that with RE4. I will say this now. I know that you're not having the best experience with it. I mean, people are still going fucking apeshit over it right now,
oh yeah.
and it's hitting. Yeah, so like I'm sure that we will see people still latching onto it and replaying it and
I
stuff
mean,
in
I've
other
been
forms.
watching the two guys that I've watched speed run RE2 and RE3. Like, just it's beautiful background noise in this really weird way. To like those games, like I know that is not great to hear, but somebody speed running those games is just like satisfying background noise for me. And even though I didn't love the game, I have been watching them like learn. And just yesterday, both of them did a full speed run of the game. So like they're around 2.5 hours to clear the game with speedrun strats. And I know I'll never be there because already there's like wall clipping and stuff that is when I'm like, well, I'm out on this game. Like when I
Yeah.
have to avoid parts of the game or skim through parts of the game using tricks, that doesn't interest me the same way. Like it'd be more interesting if you had to complete everything at a level of proficiency in order to speed run it. Does that make sense? Like I'm not
Yeah, no,
judging them for
I
that.
mean,
Like it's
no, we've talked speed running tons of times on this, and I've always said that like for me, the best speed runs are the ones where they're still doing the game.
yeah.
They've just happened to have mastered the systems enough that they can get through that stuff faster, right? Like watching somebody kick ass in Breath of the Wild while still getting all of the different powers and doing then going to Ganon and getting the Master Sword, all that is fun. I don't love watching people that just like get onto a fucking metal door, hit it 1,000 times, and then just ride that into the tower and kick the shit out of Ganon. That's cool. That's impressive that they can do it. That's not fun to me, right? So
Right.
like, more power to them, I guess.
Yeah, I want to see the game. I want to do it. And they do a lot of the game. It's just where it's Resident Evil 4, so it has the whole like shortcut system where you go through a long way and a door that was locked you can unlock so that you can like go back to the save room from before.
Right.
And the thing is that if you like look through a scope, I guess Leon stops existing. He just becomes the scope, so you can use that to walk through doors that are locked. So rather than having to go
That
through
seems
all
like
the
a big miss.
challenges, like
Is that true of all doors?
it's true of every door that has a lock on the other side. I have seen
Wow.
that as a thing that
I've
is
never
doable.
heard of that. That's wild. That is such a huge hole in the system.
I mean,
What?
that's the new game, and I don't know if that's even necessarily how it works. But the way that I see it in so the big one is the throne room, right, where you hear from Salazar for the first time, and
Right.
then you're attacked, and you have to go through, and then you fight one of the was it Garados for the first time in the basement.
Right.
It's that one where they go up to the door, they take out the rifle, they scope down, and they like start moving backwards while they're the scope, and then they're able to unlock the door. So they skip that whole like.
And so I wonder, yeah, so Leon's character must lose collision when he's in scope mode, but the scope probably doesn't.
Yeah.
So if they back up enough that the scope is on one side of the door, but technically Leon's body is on the other, then when they put the scope away, it loses collision. It goes back through the door, and now they're on the other side of the door. I don't know if this is how this works, but that has a weird level of logic to it, broken logic, but still
Yeah.
a logic to it that I think I
I
can
mean, the
figure
type
out
of
what I'm
logic
doing.
that you generally see in that type of glitch speed run, right?
Yeah.
Any percent technically is what they're calling them, and they do that for like 3-4 of the doors in the game, and I'm just like, so okay, I was probably never going to become a high level speedrunner of a Resident Evil game. Like I'm good enough to get the one that has a trophy associated with it,
Yeah.
And that feels pretty solid. But then watching that, I'm like, yeah, that's not what I'm interested. I'm not interested in this challenge the way that the challenge is presented.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm kind of running into a lot of that when I'm trying to do some of these older games right now. Like I said, I've been kind of just exploring some sillier Mario titles that I haven't played before, so like
Mm-hmm.
the Mario and Luigi versions and the Star Saga and stuff, and but also a lot of the Paper Mario stuff. And I keep running into all of this shit where I'm trying to figure out like, hey, my ROM is not quite working. I'm doing this research, and like people are offering up like broken ROMs where they're just like, oh, just do this and you're just powered up from the beginning, blah blah blah. And I'm like, I don't want to do that though. Or like YouTube videos where they're just like, oh yeah, and then you can just skip this part entirely just by like dodge rolling over here, and you're just like, I don't. This isn't what I want to do. I just want to play the game, guys. just
Yeah, I
wanna,
want to explore. I just want to
like
experience the game.
I love that speedrun communities have really become a really important tool in archiving older games, right? Like the
Mm-hmm.
ways in which speedrun communities have really kind of legitimized like a lot of the archiving tools that existed because like it should just be a legitimate thought on its own. Like these games we don't want to lose these games to time. The system doesn't exist anymore, so we're gonna digitize the entirety of the SNES library. And it's like, no, you can't do that. And it's like, but I'm doing this because of my love for this thing and the fact that I don't want to lose it. And because there's a possibility of a financial tag attached to it, you're not allowed to do that shit, right? But for some reason, like tournament like life and speedrunning tournaments and speedrunning communities have like really been given kind of a blind eye approach in a lot of ways. Like this is something that we talked about a little while back when suddenly Nintendo was getting really weird about Smash tournaments.
Mm-hmm.
Noticeably, that stuff is very much quieted down since that shit hit the fan back at Thanksgiving. But I'm sure we have not heard the true end of that yet. But for right now, right, like that seems to have kind of quieted down. So like speedrunning communities kind of are just kind of allowed to just openly talk about this shit, which is great. But what that does is it does unfortunately kind of poison the well for anybody out there trying to do anything besides speed running games or like tournament versions of like hardcore versions of game. Like I don't want that. I just want the original game as it was, and I want the ability to put it in my hands and play it today. If that's possible, please, thank you. And like that's not the easiest thing to come by nowadays.
Which it does make me want to offer you something though, because I know that you've also been going through Zelda stuff. Do you want the Zelda 2 Redux ROM where like the quality of life is there, so you start at the palaces when you die in the palaces and
I
things
don't
like
know.
that? Have you ever played
As
through
somebody that's
Zelda
never,
2?
no, as somebody that's never played Zelda 2, like I, my first instinct is to say no because I want to play Zelda 2 if I ever play Zelda 2. But on the other hand, I also know enough about Zelda 2 to know that some quality of life changes to it might not be the worst approach to it, right? So like it's this weird line between like on the one hand, like I want the pristine version of this thing to exist so that we can always go back to it. On the other hand, I also want to still be able to enjoy my time with it. And what is the best way to do that? For speedrunners, it is the speedrun tactics. And so like it's a totally legitimate way to approach like going back to this old stuff. I will never sit here and act like they're not playing the game because they're
Right.
clipping through doors and shit. No, they're playing the game that exists in the way that it's there. Like if this was not the way that it was intended to be played, that's a different conversation. But that's not the same as saying they're not playing the game, you know?
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
I definitely get that. Yeah.
So it's just this weird balancing act as somebody that wants to invest in this concept of historically archiving and being able to experience and talk about these things while at the same time also like I'm a guy that just wants to have some fun while he plays some video games.
So I mean, the Zelda 2 Redux, I would recommend it. If you've never played Zelda 2 before, right? If you're speedrunning it, you wouldn't be able to use something like the quality of life ROM, right? Then they'd be like, no, that's not the pure version of the game. I'm sure there'd be like a separate leaderboard for it, but there's there's that approach to it. But
Yeah.
that game, Zelda 2 is great. The thing that I learned when I played through all of the 2D Zelda games back in 2019 is just how good a game Zelda 2 is just punishingly difficult.
Well, yeah, it's interesting to me
Yeah.
that you really like Zelda 2 because one of the biggest complaints from Zelda fans about Zelda 2 is how not Zelda it is,
Yeah,
which is one
right.
of your biggest
Which
complaints
is one
about
of my
something
big
like Breath of
complaints
the
about other
Wild.
stuff, yes. But it's a good game in its own right.
I
Like,
sure,
I will
yes,
admit that.
I Yeah, and I
And it's
100% like and support that kind of view on a game that happens to have the Zelda branding on it that happens to maybe not follow the formula of other Zelda games.
yes. Oh wow. Wait, am I the hypocrite here? Is that what I just became? No, I know. I know that Breath of the Wild is a different thing. It just wasn't what I was looking for at the time because
No,
I
and
I
I'm
was
poking fun at you
yeah.
specifically because you're here with me, but like that is one of the big critiques of the Breath of the Wild Tears. And as I said, we're seeing this with the Tears of the Kingdom stuff, where people are like, "Oh, this is just going to be more Breath of the Wild." Is they're disappointed because they feel like Breath of the Wild is not their Zelda, and you know that's unfortunate, but also like I like Breath of the Wild, so I'm happy. So it's hard for me to feel bad about
It
this.
is also a valid criticism. If you didn't like the game and there's going to be more of a game you didn't like, you that can bum you out. I get that. I
Yeah,
understand
I don't know
that.
if I would
Like,
call that valid criticism, but it's definitely a valid emotion.
well, no, if you think that like if they're answering critiques, right? If there were critiques of it and then the game is shown and your specific critique wasn't one of the ones addressed because like the
Sure, but I would
fusion
argue that
no, yeah,
that Breath of the Wild is too different of a Zelda game is not a valid critique to begin with. You need to break it down into specific elements because
okay.
there's plenty of Zelda games that you could point to that are not normal Zelda games that are now definitive to some people.
That's a good point.
Like Ocarina of Time when it first came out, like pretty much sold itself on being the most different Zelda you could ever play.
Which is strange because it's so not.
Well, again,
Yeah.
in retrospect, it has become like definitive in the realm of Zelda.
In 3D Zelda space, definitely. I don't know, but yeah, I've always said they should do a remake of Zelda 2. I like if they made it with actual quality of life. I think that people would enjoy it a lot more. So yeah, if you ever get down to it, don't feel bad doing the Redux version, because even as somebody who struggled through the original version of that game, I don't. I think starting at the palace when you die instead of going back to Zelda, that just feels like what Zelda does.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
doesn't feel like
You know what I
oh
just realized is there has to be some soul out there. You know, I was gonna say poor soul, but maybe they're living their best life where their version of Zelda, like the thing that they know Zelda from and enjoy playing Zelda, is fucking Hyrule Warriors.
and I would oh god, especially if Linkle's involved. I am a huge fan of Linkle. She's
It
great.
just occurred to me that has to be that there has to be somebody out there that is true for them.
That's
But
just
I
the
don't
way
play
it
other
is.
Zelda games, but I play them Hyrule Warrior games.
I don't know, but even then, like the Calamity one, Age of Calamity, is so different from the first one.
Yeah.
I don't know. I really like the first Hyrule Warriors, but then again, I had like, oh, I'm gonna try Fire Emblem Warriors, and then suddenly I cared about Fire Emblem because when it's real time strategy, I pretty much can just leave it where it is and be like, this isn't my cup of tea. But yeah, I don't know. All right, we're coming to the end of this one. Is there anything else that we haven't talked on yet before we talk about maybe some of the other things that we should address before we say goodbye?
Maybe. What are you talking about? Now you get me all worried. What did we forget?
Well, no, well, I mean, there's the indictment of Donald Trump. Like, I feel like it deserves like a minute from us. And like,
Yeah,
what is that gonna
I
mean? Like,
mean,
how do you feel about it?
I feel like we've been close before. This is maybe the closest we've ever been to seeing any semblance of sanity return to the world, but it's not giving me hope the way that the world's reacting to it. So, not the world, but America is reacting to it.
No, you can
There's
say the
just
world.
there's No,
I know what you
I
mean.
don't know, man. I think part
Yeah.
of the reason that we didn't, I don't care to talk about it at the moment is because, like, so far all we've established is that the citizens of New York have agreed that he is done some shady shit, which I could have told you was the truth before. So like,
Right, yeah.
nothing has really changed in that regard.
Well, he is going to be
But
taken into custody. That's the big thing, and he's going to turn
I
himself in.
again
He's not going to be
will
perp
kind
walked.
of
I don't.
I will believe it when I see it. I think he's going to end up in house arrest at Mar-a-Lago, which he pretty much has been in exile there for a while
Yeah,
anyway. So again, not much really changing in the state of the world.
yeah.
So we'll see.
I don't know. It's sometimes it's fun to
I
ground
don't seem to be
ourselves.
nihilistic. Let me put this out there because I don't want it to sound like I'm being nihilistic or I'm being like, oh, the government's not going to drop the ball on this one. I don't know what the fuck is going to happen. So I didn't want to talk about it because I don't have any opinion or thought at the moment.
Same here. I that's not true. My big thought is how into his playbook are they playing by indicting him? Because it really kind of feels like that's what he wants them to do.
Yeah, but he looked like a real fool a week ago when he was getting everybody riled up for that day, and then they swooped in a week later. And so, like, so if this was part of his plan, I fail to see it. This starts to get a little bit too much like the 4D chess master bullshit that people
Yeah.
say about him. That is just like blatantly untrue. The dude's an idiot. Like let's just get this down. And like at the end of the day, like he is not some master planner. So I don't think there is a master plan for them to play into. Is the story?
That's a good point. I don't know. It's been weird. I guess I don't want to talk about it because it's just been
yeah. It's
the weirdest
an actual
thing.
indictment of a past U.S. president. So yeah, it's fucking weird, dude.
It's a historical little moment that I felt like we should probably give it a minute. And yeah, it's an evolving story. We don't have everything yet. And then I guess the other thing is just to check in. I mean, has anything else come from the Jonathan Majors thing besides the text from his girlfriend that really just felt like it proved domestic abuse in a weird way as opposed to disproving it?
Yeah, he basically just kind of outed a lot of shit in that regard. And so, like, I think he's pretty much lost the court of public opinion at this point, no matter what happens. Because for anybody that was keeping track, I don't know if we mentioned this when we talked about it last time, but the charges were recanted, or the claims were recanted, I think is the proper way to say that.
Yeah.
I'm going to try and be as specific as I can about this stuff so that, like, yeah, but the claim was recanted, but, like, I think we did talk about this because that's not unusual in domestic violence cases for a multitude of reasons, sometimes legitimate, sometimes not so much. So like that's like a weird world that's in. And then like, yeah, in order to try and prove his innocence, they released a bunch of texts that sure didn't seem like they proved his innocence. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's just it was my fault for trying to take your phone. No, it doesn't give him carte blanche to beat up on you. I don't. What?
What? Yeah, that's
that was the big one that just I don't know. It was just such a big part of last week's episode
I mean,
that
like,
it would feel weird not to report on the small information that we have.
Yeah, no, I still find myself in the weird position where like my only real connection to this is through like the film industry. And so like to to like really try and form like a meaningful opinion on this, I have to just keep reminding myself that nope, there's humans on the other end of this, so maybe we don't need to.
Yeah. Okay. Then we can stop talking about it. It's weird how it was such a big deal. Like it blew up and then it just like kind of flashed in the pan.
No, I think the bigger thing to talk about, it kind of is tangentially related to this, but I think will inevitably related to this is Disney's big win this week with all of the Disney World stuff that happened in Florida, where they were going to lose control over that part of the state, and then they pretty much pulled one of the like smoothest legal maneuvers that in the past, like, well, also one of the simplest, was just, from what I'm understanding from a lot of legal people online talking about it, is that this was a very simple move but also a very smooth one in that like nobody stopped them. But they basically like kicked DeSantis in the nuts this week, just kind of proving like don't fuck with the mouse, like the way that these lawyers can come in and get out of a contract or manipulate a contract to see fit is kind of creepy. And like in that regard with the Jonathan Major stuff, all of these people being like, this is the end of Marvel, this is going to destroy the fifth phase. No, it's not. Like they're going to come in, and if they feel the need to move some shit around, they'll move some shit around, and there will be a Marvel movie in front of your eyeballs soon enough. Do not worry.
May 5th is the next Marvel movie, so don't fret, ladies and gentlemen. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is still coming. Tickets are on sale today when we've released this. So
yeah,
not to shill, just the fact that I know I have to try to get my tickets to the movie.
I'm curious to see what happens with Guardians too, because there's I'm to my understanding at the moment, there's still a lot of love for that franchise and a lot of love and for the fact that it's like a goodbye to them and stuff. But I also know that there's been a lot of weird opinions about James Gunn recently with the way that he's been taking over the DCEU stuff. So I'm curious to see what happens there too.
Yeah.
I'll be there. Let me make that clear. I will be there for Guardians.
Right? Yeah. No. It's probably going to be the last film that I see in theaters till after the summertime. Right? Because it's also like May 5th sort of is going to be the kickoff to the summer movie season. And one of the reasons I feel comfortable going when I'm going now is a lot of the times I'm going during a weekday. Right? I'm not taking It's not like
They're
I'm
still in
going Friday
school.
night at 8 p.m. So the kids
Right.
are in school. Most people are at work. So it's other people like me who are taking the day off, or the unemployed, which more power to you, right? Or you work a later shift. I don't want to just like target anybody there, right? But the people who are going, they're smaller auditoriums. If I go see a movie at 11 in the morning, you know.
Yep.
So I'm willing to do that, but that's going to change once it's summertime
Yes.
because the kids will no longer be in school. So the 11 a.m. is going to be, oh my God, it's the thing that gets the kid out of the house during the middle of the day. Take my child now. So I think it's going to be Guardians, and then I don't know. I mean, like, are there other movies that I should have any interest in right now, Sejohn?
I don't know, man. I haven't like. There's all sorts of stuff. People are starting to try and hype up Blue Beetle because I think they're just trying to move past the Flash.
Yup.
I don't know, but I don't know. Blue Beetle's supposed to be November, I think.
Yeah, it's definitely past August. I know that for a fact. So November would make sense with how they used to do the release schedule, right?
Yeah, but who knows? Like the
Yeah.
other thing is because that's also based off of a poster, which alongside the poster for the Marvels that is up in every movie theater in Utah right now has a date of like May something because it was when it was originally slotted
Oh,
for.
yeah. It was supposed to be out in March, wasn't it?
Or March, maybe that's what it was. Yeah, man.
Yeah, because they moved Ant-Man and It was the big. I don't know. It's so everything is so crazy up in the air right now. But you're not wrong. I hadn't even considered the way that people are talking about Guardians. I've been focused right now on Super Mario Brothers, which it sounds like we'll have opinions on the new Super Mario Brothers movie, the next episode, right?
I'm
So,
hoping to.
I hope to too. All right. Anything else that you want to add, Steve, before we send this one away?
No. I mean, the biggest thing is just if you have some opinions about Zelda 2, and if you want to maybe talk to Dev about what the Redux is all about, you can reach out to him at Devon D. Decker.
Excellent. I'd love to hear from it. And if you have thoughts and feelings about us injecting more real world news into the show, we've definitely kind of done it the last couple of weeks, and I've enjoyed it. I liked it coming later because it weirdly cast a pallor over last episode. But we'd like to hear from you on that. So you can find us on Twitter at The Say Report to send along any criticism or critique on that. And also if you have any specific messages for Sejohn, because he is no longer on Twitter, because he's a genius. He's the smartest man in the world. I wish I could follow your shining example, Sejohn. That's what I will say. But I just, it's so instinctual to check Twitter now.
Did you hear about all the shit with the source code?
No, what?
Elon released the source code, parts of the source code, because he was trying to, I guess this wasn't an April Fool's joke after all. He was trying to see if he could recruit people to work for free for him. You can look into that on your own if you want. But essentially, he put the source code for Twitter out there for people to be poking around at. And somebody supposedly found a tag basically filtration for Elon tweets. They found that the four biggest tags were something like author is Republican, author is Democrat, and then number one was like author is Elon. I forget what the number four was on that list. Like probably like author is Donald Trump or some shit. but essentially like the number one like author search was Elon. So basically Twitter had in its source code a system set up to specifically find Elon tweets and highlight them in different ways.
Unsurprising things to say goodbye with this episode.
But the fact that he like burned himself by putting the fucking code out there for people to see that. Now, this could all be April Fool's jokes because this entire episode could just be an April Fool's joke.
Oh my God, was this episode an April Fool's joke? Will, you'll have to confirm for the people. Have a good one, everybody.
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host Devon Decker and Sejohn Selwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so this is delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.